just while our clerks are coming up, I hope everybody had a wonderful Easter weekend. Beautiful weather. I think we can officially say winter's over. I'll stick my neck out and make that claim. Usually you could tell with that wonderful thunderstorm we had and what the 4 inches of rain, the first thunderstorm of the year usually marks the end of the snow. So, though I think somebody said there's some nasty snow might be coming here, I think we can do without it. Okay, John, when you're ready.
Your Worship and members, all members are present with the exception of Councillor Michael Smith. Alternate Councillor Saunders is in attendance.
Thank you. So I'll look for Councillor Dolan to approve the agenda.
Thank you, Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Cox that the agenda for April the 11th, 2023 meeting of County Council be approved.
Any questions on the agenda? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Do I have a disclosure of pecuniary interest by any member of council? Not seeing any. So presentations and deputations, we have none this morning, but I'll call upon Councillor Burkett to read and move the resolution.
Good morning, Your Worship. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Norcross, that the Council Communications and Proclamations March the 14th, 2023 to April the 10th, 2023 having given due consideration be received.
Questions? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. And Councillor Burkett, oh no, we got you there. Deputy Warden on the adoption of the Council on the minutes.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Locke, that the following Council minutes be confirmed and adopted, and Committee of the Whole reports be confirmed. Joint Council and Committee of the Whole, March 14th, 2023.
Questions? All in favor? That is carried as well. Thank you. Presentations in committee, we have none. Presentations and consideration of special committee reports, we have none. Presentations of the county officers report, we have none. And motions of which notices have been previously given, we have none. I don't believe I have any notices of motion this morning. None were presented to me, and no closed sessions. So consideration of the bills. I've got a few announcements here. We don't even have any bills this morning, so it's going to be a record short meeting. I want to take this opportunity to remind council members of the upcoming dates to keep in mind. April 25th, there's a waste management workshop scheduled following the Council and Committee of the Whole meeting. And May 9th, there's an optional bus tour of the county sites for members following the Council and Committee meetings that day as well. May 23rd, there's a planning workshop scheduled following the Council and Committee meetings. Tried to do them all after meetings when I've got your undivided attention. So June 13th, there's an optional media training for members following the Council and Committee of the Whole. Details have or will be shared about these opportunities. And as you'll notice, we're doing our best to host all, as I just said, we try and do them all on the Tuesday so that we can get you folks here while I've already got you. So with that, Councillor Norcross, can you do the confirmatory bylaw?
Good morning, Your Worship, and thank you. It's moved by myself, second by Councillor Burkett, that Bill number 7005-23 be enacted as a bylaw of the County of Simcoe.
Okay, on that motion, all in favor? That is carried. So I guess we will just stay seated and look for my chairs to come up and join me. John, do you want to proceed that way? Oh, adjournment. Oh, sorry. Better find that. I believe that's Councillor Norcross again, is it not? Yes, Councillor Norcross, if you could do my adjournment, I apologize, sir.
No, thank you, Your Worship, through you. Moved by myself, second by Councillor Measures, that the April 11, 2023 meeting of County Council be adjourned at 9:06.
9:06 is what I'm showing. All right. Questions on that? All in favor? That is carried. A little quicker than we're used to, but that's what happens when we have a combined. So we'll roll right into our Committee of the Whole in a few minutes as soon as everybody takes their place. Okay, we're back. So I'll look for the attendance again, Mr. Clerk.
Your Worship, all county councillors in attendance with alternate councillor Saunders as well. We have Aurelia councillor Durnford, Aurelia councillor Fallis, Barrie councillor Hamlin is absent, Aurelia Mayor McIsaac is in attendance, Barrie councillor Nguisi is absent, Barrie Mayor Nuttall is absent, Barrie councillor Riepma is in attendance.
Thank you, Clerk Daly. So I'll look for approval of the agenda. Councillor Dolan, are you computer up and running? Yes.
Thank you, Your Worship. Moved by myself and seconded by Councillor McClellan that the agenda for the April 11th, 2023 meeting of Committee of the Whole be approved.
Questions on the agenda? All in favor? That is carried. Thank you. Do I have a disclosure of pecuniary interest by any member of council? Not seeing any presentations and delegations. We don't have any, so I'll appoint Chairman Cox, Performance Management.
Good morning, everyone. 5.1 CCW Simcoe County Archives operations in February 2023. A mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Fowler, second by Councillor Bell. That item CCW 2023-088 dated April 11th, 2023 regarding Simcoe County Archives operations in February 2023 we received. Any questions or comments? Seeing none? Oh, wait, sorry. Councillor Smith.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Through you, I apologize. My computer, they gave me a new fob that makes the computer work, and it doesn't work. So I'm sharing with Councillor Miskevitz here. So if you'll bear with me, I believe this is the item with respect to the affordable housing in Barrie. Is that correct?
No, sorry. It's the one just the Simcoe County Archives.
Oh, my apologies. Sorry.
That's okay.
Thank you.
No problem. Any other comments or questions? All in favor? Carried. Thank you.
Is that your last one, was it?
Yes.
Okay. Now I will appoint Councillor Leduc for Human Services. Go ahead, Chairman.
Thank you, Warden. And we're at item 6, Human Services Social Housing. So I'm going to turn it over. It's CCW 2023-061. I'm going to turn it over to our General Manager, Fayaz Baguette, to give us an introduction of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Through the Chair, I'd like to introduce Director of Housing Services, Brad Spiewak, and the Maintenance and Facilities Engineer Supervisor, Pierce McDonald, to share a presentation on this report.
There, is that better? Great. So good morning, everyone, and your worship, members of council. So just go through a couple other members of the team that we did bring along, depending on what questions we get. We do have Jason Allen, who's our construction supervisor. Jason's done quite a number of our affordable housing developments throughout the county. So if there's any construction-related questions, we'll turn that over to Jason. And we also do have Michael McKnight from MCL Architects. So MCL Architects has done quite a number of different affordable housing projects with us as well. So again, if there's questions that way that we may need to answer on the architectural side, Mike will be happy to answer those. So just give a brief overview of the presentation. Hopefully from our staff side, we know it's a complicated report. It is a longer report with a lot of options. So hopefully some of the commentary that we lay out today will help council arrive at some of the decisions that we do require. The presentation is going to be mostly focused on the finances. That's, I know, the big ticket item, as it were, and it's certainly some of the most complicated things. Within the council report, there's the business case included as a schedule, and there's also a schedule that goes through a number of the nice pictures and renderings of the building. And so hopefully you've had a chance to look through those. But if you haven't, this is the site that is being proposed at 20 Rose Street in Barrie. So we'll go through a little bit of background. Like I said, just a brief project description, focus a little more around the costs, and talk about some mixed income model options. So this is something new that we haven't done, and talk about some costs of construction and, of course, some next steps. So just a little bit of background again. The property at 20 Rose Street was purchased by the county a few years ago. Many of you remember the old original OPP station that was built in the late 50s. I think it was 57 or 58 is what resided there since that time. Once we acquired the property for affordable housing, we then did go in and demolish the old OPP station and got the site cleaned up and prepped and ready for what'll be the next development. And what's happening right there, or currently right now, is a modular homeless shelter. So many of you remember the temporary shelter was put in over the course of the fall and made active in early December there, or just before Christmas, and that is continuing to operate right now. And we do have some options throughout the summer to still utilize the modular structure. So social and community service is going through a few options of what it could be used throughout the summer. And then we do also have an option, if there is a need, to run the shelter one more winter. So we can almost run it till about a year from now, in which case the shelter would have to be removed and to make room for construction to start. And of course, we know we do have a significant need within the city of Barrie. Right now, we have pretty much almost 5,000 names on the wait list to get into affordable and social housing, and about 3 of those 5,000 are from the city of Barrie. So the city of Barrie does make up a lion's share of the need in the community. So just a brief project description. What we've shown here is an 8 and a 10-story building. So this is the 154-unit option, and we have 2 ground floor levels of commercial space. So social and community services would be located on the 2nd floor, and then on the ground floor we have our usual community kitchens, program rooms, and space for children's services, where we work with some of our other partners for licensed childcare, and as well as the education sector. You will notice a link to the right and off to a parking structure. So unfortunately, when we're in big urban areas, we either need to put parking underground or above ground. Underground is obviously the most expensive, while above ground is less expensive, although it still carries a fairly heavy price tag. Unfortunately, that's what when you get into built-up urban areas, though, that it just becomes a necessity. The 2 residential towers, like I said, are about 8 and 10 stories, sitting on top. And for the land that we have there, given our soil conditions, we're about as high as we can go. So staff was tasked with adding more units, and some of our municipal partners have put a formal request in that we look at additional floors, and that's why you'll see that other model is in the options as well. Having a look from the 400 facing south, so you can see it, we very well cube out the site or take advantage of the full lands that are available to us. There's not much space left. This is about as dense as we can possibly go, taking into account that parking structure. We do have some future opportunity we could do on top of the parking structure, and that's something we can look at further if that's warranted. And in terms of parking, we've actually reduced parking as much as we can. So we know from our residential spaces, our affordable and RGI units, a half a space per unit is plenty. That's typically what we have at all of our other almost 30 buildings. So we have lots of parking data there. When it comes to the commercial use, we can't really restrict parking. That's a mandated thing. It's usually needed for those employees and staff, as well as the visitors. And then for our market units, we've given them a parking space per unit. So again, we've squished the parking down as much as we possibly can, knowing it is a significant cost. The city of Barrie also recognizes that they do have some parking relief in their policies for affordable housing, which again makes sense. Having a look at what would be the tenant outdoor amenity area. So one of the lessons learned or best practices that we've had over time is it's best if we can keep some of the residential areas separate from the public areas, and especially with seniors, there's a certain security and safeness that's needed. So on the ground floor, we would have the public program rooms that can be used for events, and on the upper levels is where we actually would keep the tenant use spaces. So again, trying to keep that separation from a security point of view. As you know, all of our buildings, again, due to cost, we don't put balconies on. Balconies are expensive to build, and they're even more expensive to maintain. So rather than have every unit have a balcony, from a cost control point of view, we provide an outdoor amenity area that can be multi-use for residents, and that's what we've shown there. Just a quick view of what our typical program rooms look like. So this is the program room for the ground floor. However, it would be very similar for what the tenants can use. So we usually have an accessible kitchen. There's usually TVs. They can be used for meetings, or a lot of some of the tenants will watch movies, the news together, different activities. And then, of course, lots of bright windows that we can get them outside. So whether it's on the ground floor or under the terraces on the upper floors. So let's talk about costs, because I know this is a big ticket item. So going down the line, you'll notice again we have the two options. So starting with the first option, the 154 units, we're looking at a total of around 176 million. What is that comprised of? Well, the first chunk is the land. So you can see whenever we've been able to get donated land, that's a huge help. And social housing, we're going to continue to try to pursue partnerships with some of our municipalities. So if we can try to get additional free land down the road, because land is expensive, and land is definitely expensive in urban areas like Barrie. So you're about 5 million on the land. Hard costs, you can see the number for about 113. Site costs at almost 12 million. When it comes to this particular site, we have a good water supply, which is great when we were working with the city of Barrie. Unfortunately, we don't have a stormwater or sanitation, so we are going to have to take lines down the street, down Rose Street a little bit towards the Peel Street intersection. So there's a few hundred meters of services we got to bring to the site. You can imagine the services needed at the old OPP would have been much smaller than what we're proposing that was going to be there. Soft costs is just a typical percentage applied that we use. We have our own staffing to run the projects, and then that's the cost of the parking structure. So the parking structure, like I said, in a perfect world, we'd be all above ground. That's the best we can do. Worst case scenario from a cost point of view would be underground. So what we've done here is sunk one level partially underground to try to, we have to make the heights work so that you can, when you're looking out the windows of the units, you're actually not looking into a parking garage, you're looking over top of it. So we have two above ground, one below, and then there is a sound wall. So because we're along the 400 series highway, we do need a wall. And you'll often see that whenever you see residential neighborhoods next to the highway, there are often 12, 14 foot walls that go along the highway. So we are going to need those. Right now we're putting a budget in for it. Obviously, we'll be engaged with the Ministry of Transportation, or MTO, what costs they can cover. Hopefully all of it, but we don't know yet, so we had to budget for it. And you can kind of see where that ends up. Now, for the tasking of the 2 additional floors, so we're able to add another floor per tower, if you want that. There's 11 units in each floor, so additional 22 units at about $10 million. So $5 million a floor. We pick up 11 units. Our cost per unit actually comes down. It's fairly competitive at about $450,000 per unit. So obviously, the higher we can go and get more units on there, our cost per unit does drop, which is good. But again, you can see that adds about another 10 million onto the price tag. These numbers that we're showing aren't in today's dollars. These are dollars 3 years from now. So that's the other thing. We have a large project that's not going to start for a year, and we've got to get through, the remainder of inflation in 2023, 2024, 2025, and into construction finishing in 26. So these numbers also have inflation built into them. The county uses several different cost consulting firms. The one on this particular one, there's about a 20% inflation over the next 3 years is what they're using, which isn't crazy when you actually look at what we've seen. So some are predicting a more return to normal over the next couple of years, back down to that 5 to 7% range. Others are still predicting inflation is going to stay high. So we were some of us were in a webinar last week with a different consulting firm, cost consulting firm, and they're still predicting holding about 10% a little longer and a bit more of a delay in that recovery. But again, a lot of it is unknown at this point. So again, we have to bake that into the numbers of what the inflation could be over the next few years. So that's kind of the bad news, because that's the money that's going out the door. So we want to look at, well, what's the benefit? What's the money that we're going to be bringing back in? So, and that's where this comes into this is the revenue side of the equation. So the option one, which we've requested, is what our typical model has been in the past. So it's pure affordable. We have our 154 units. We have to have our 64 replacement units as RGI. So these are the scattered houses that are being sold in Barrie. So those RGI units, they make up the service level standard as dictated by the province. And so we're going to continue to charge RGI rates for those. However, the remainder of the units, the remaining 90 units, we could put at 80% of average market rent, or 80% AMR. And what that would generate is about 900,000 of of income, profit almost as it were, back towards the county. And when that comes from, so we want to say when that number's coming back, so we've paid our staff, we've paid our insurance, our utilities, our taxes. I always say we take our one big piggy bank where we take a certain amount of dollars per unit that goes into that piggy bank to offset future capital. So the money is there when we need windows, roof, driveways repainted, kitchens redone, all of those sorts of things. The other thing we have, there's a separate piggy bank to deal with that parking garage. So the money that's coming in from the parking garage is going into that bank account. Because again, parking garage is usually in that 20, 25 year range, you start having to sink again millions into them to get them back up to operating conditions. So that's all that money is being taken out, and that's kind of what we're left with. So that's good. Now, if we wanted to step up one level further, we could say, well, what if we actually want to move to a more mixed income model, which is what we're seeing a little more. So have a bit more diverse tenants in the building and actually charge full market rent at some of the units. And when we say full market, it actually is still slightly below. I think in the council report, we do have a breakdown of what those market rents are, and you can look at them and see they are certainly on the low end, even at 100 AMR, as we call it. So option two, we have to keep our 64 units of RGI. We have to keep 24 units at 80 AMR, because if you recall in past reports, we did put $6 million of federal and provincial funding into the build. So those units have to remain affordable. So there's 24 of those units. However, the remaining 66 can actually go to 100% market. And that actually bumps us up over to 1.1 million in return. And you can see over the lifetime of the building, 50 years, we pick up almost 57 million that can be reinvested back into the social services. The last option is where we actually say, okay, well, let's add these extra floors on, and we bump up to 176 units. We know there's need. And what if we actually go to true market? So now we have these top floors of the building with a lovely view of Kempenfelt Bay and a brand new building where we can actually charge more. And even at 120% AMR, we're just slightly below market, true market, where it would be closer to 2,000 a unit in some of the other, condos and apartments in the area. So we still have to keep our 64 units at RGI like before, our 24 that are federally and provincially funded. Our 66, we'll keep them at 100 AR, and then those 22 on the top floor will charge, practically is to the limit of what we think we can get for them. And that puts us up to about 1.5 million a year, or almost 80 million in return over the lifetime of the building. Now, those extra floors do cost more. As we said, we know it's about 10 million, but we do pick up some extra rent. So, in a simple analysis, and again, we have that indicated in the report, it's about a 24-year payback for those extra floors. So we're going to spend an extra 10 million, put extra floors on. However, monthly we're going to get extra rent. Those floors are paid for in about 24, 25 years. So that's something definitely to consider as part of that. All right, so when it comes to some of the costs of construction, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it over to Mr. McDonald just for the next slide.
Hi everyone. As mentioned, my name is Pierce McDonald, and I am the Maintenance Facilities Engineering Supervisor within the county's Social Housing Department. I'm fairly new to the county, but previous to joining the county, I worked for over a decade in the private sector, working for a national multidisciplined engineering firm where I designed all types of buildings from apartments and hotels to restaurants and car dealerships. Then for the last few years with the firm, I was appointed the Ontario branch manager. Today I'm here to provide insight into the cost of construction for the newest social housing site located in Barrie. Since 2017, the SCHC has completed 3 new builds in Collingwood, Wasaga Beach, and Victoria Harbour, and are currently in the construction phase of 2 more in Orillia and Bradford. As you can see here, beside the location is the year that construction has begun, the number of units, and the cost for construction divided down into a per unit basis. Please note that the cost to purchase the land has been neglected to allow for a fair comparison. Lastly, the column on the far right is the cost per unit of construction, incorporating the inflation to show what it would cost to be built in the year of 2023. From this table, you can see that the Collingwood build and Wasaga Beach build both would have cost approximately 2.5 times as much to be built in the year 2023. And the Victoria Harbour project is approximately 2.4 times the cost. Another thing you can pull from this table would be to compare Wasaga Beach to Bradford, as they're both very similar in design. And you can see that the Bradford build cost per unit is more than 2.3 times the price of Wasaga Beach only 5 years later. Since 2020, there have seen a rise and increase in construction demand, supply chain issues, fuel prices rising, and a labor shortage, which have all increased the inflationary rates, as you can see in this comparison. Lastly, I'd like to point out that the Barrie price of $787,181 per unit, also as previously mentioned, does incorporate the estimated inflation for the years of 2024 to 2026 construction, as well as the residential percentage of the parking structure and the sound wall construction costs. Now, when I was in the private sector, my startup meetings would always be spent trying to convince the clients to think long-term and to spend the capital up front to create a more cost-effective building over its lifetime. I was pleasantly surprised that when I joined the county to see that all of these items and more have already been incorporated into the SCHC new builds. The design uses high energy efficient, low maintenance systems with built-in redundancies within the elevators, ventilation, heating and cooling, as well as generator backup, which in the event of a failure does minimize the effect to the vulnerable population. Also, the building is fully equipped with spare parts to quickly make any repairs needed. The SCHC has also put a lot of design details into the modest units to keep the tenants safe and comfortable. Every unit can be converted into a barrier-free unit if needed to keep the tenants in their units so that we don't have to move them or send them to long-term care. They all have walk-in showers, blocking for future grab bars. They have turning radiuses, and the switches and plugs are already ADA compliant. Additionally, for seniors needing a visitor to spend the night, there is a guest suite in the building that can also alternatively use for short-term emergency housing. The design also incorporates quality materials such as concrete partition that are not only durable but also minimize the sound transmission into the units. As well as a building envelope with green technologies incorporated to provide low air leakage and high thermal resistance, reducing our carbon footprint, which keeps maintenance costs low, our operating costs low, and rents affordable. Lastly, I would just like to point out to the picture on this slide. It looks like just a normal hallway, but you can see that the hallway is wide and bright, that the block walls and tile floors are there for durability. You can see a security camera and handrails that are designed there for safety. And you can even see an architectural feature at the base of the wall there that looks great, but is also there to reduce damage and maintenance costs. Thank you.
So just quickly go over some timing and next steps. So we're in that phase of the pre-construction timeframe. So depending on the outcome of council, we would continue through the actual go into what we call our design development stage for the rest of this year, with a hope then to actually break ground in the spring of 2024 And a project of this size, we're a solid 2 years, maybe even 2.5 years, depending on, delays of materials and how kind or unkind winters are, because that can affect us a little bit. And we would look then at opening in 2026. So just some final comments then before we go to questions. So hopefully you've given consideration to some of the options. Certainly option 3 provides the largest net benefit back to the county, provides something that's the most sustainable, and actually would generate, like I said, the best net benefit. A couple things to consider if we did want to go with option 4 and waiting is that the inflation monster, as it were, doesn't go away. We can pause, but inflation won't. So this is something to consider, is that even if we waited 2 years and we could potentially get some more funding from the province, the funding from the province has to be greater than the rate of inflation, or we're actually worse off. So if our best case scenario, we've seen money from the province lately is maybe 8, maybe 10 million tops. Well, 1 year's inflation is about 18 million, right? So waiting, although it is an option, if we don't actually get enough money from the province, we'll actually no further ahead. And that's kind of one of the downsides of when we're in the inflation market that we're in right now. The only other couple of small considerations is the Ontario Works Office will be moving out of 136 Bayfields. So that's something that we do kind of have to deal with at the back burner. If that, obviously it's intended to go in this building, but if this building is going to be postponed, staff will have to look into some other arrangements for the Barrie Ontario Works Office. All right, I think we're good. We can now take questions.
All right, thank you very much for that presentation. Mina, you want to say something?
No, I'm just ready for
Okay, so we'll go to questions then. So I've got Councillor McDonald, Councillor Bell, Councillor Greenlaw, Councillor Van Staven. Okay, I'll get to everybody after. We'll start with those right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and through to the presenters. Just for clarification, we say that we want 154, 176 affordable housing units. But when you spoke, it's almost like you're having a penthouse at the top, or you have ones that are more expensive. And I think that goes, for me, against what we were trying to achieve. Because if you're paying that kind of money for your rent, you don't need to be in an affordable housing. So that was one. And why is there not anything saying how much the cost is, like of the project for carrying the project? It's on there. It was an asterisk. And just for clarification, please. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Councillor, through the chair. So for the first part of the question, we're presenting different options of combinations of housing. Previously, all the builds that you saw on the one slide were fully affordable housing models where the rent is affordable, and that's defined by either 80% of average market rent or a combination of thereof. In order to get the maximized amount of units developed and to maintain sustainability. So one of the unique things that we do here at the county that's a little different than everywhere else is we build a project that's front-end loaded in expense in order to pay for its lifetime of its operating and maintenance costs. So in order to do that and have for a build of this size and have it be sustainable, as we've done in the past, we needed to introduce a mixed income model as an alternative option. So if you operated it at 100% affordable, like in option 1, you saw that the range of balancing to sustainability was about $900,000 a year to almost a break even. Once you start going higher and you want to increase more services and make sure it's more sustainable, that mixed income model can be a tool to help you get there. So that's why we're showing the different options, option 1, 2, and 3. So for option 3, to your question, with the top floors being above market rent, that's how you kind of create that mixed income community. One of the best practices out there that we've seen both in Ontario, Europe, across Canada and the States is that the more mixed income models you have, the less social kind of impacts on the community you'll see, as then you start to introduce a good balance within the community. So social kind of social problems that often may arise when a community is maybe all of one type of affordability or income scale versus a variety of different incomes. So that's the one reason. The second part of the question, I may ask our finance team to discuss a little bit more. You're correct. The whole overall cost on this presentation, we're showing you the three different price points for developing the sites based on each option. How do we finance or fund that? That's something I can have my colleague GM to help address.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor. This was a comparable presentation compared to our other presentations. So in terms of financing, we have a portfolio of projects within the county. Some of those need financing, some of them don't. And it depends how we want to move forward with this. At this point in time, we've included this in our long-term financial plan. So if you recall, each year we look at that, and that will be included in the long-term plan. That's where we really evaluate our total cost for the whole portfolio. To assign it to individual projects renders them uncomparable, so this allows us to compare this project and how we're going to move forward. We have plenty of options in terms of how we can finance this. The other reason that I didn't put exactly how much that would be is that we don't know how much we're going to get in terms of funding towards this. So we're hopeful that we're going to get funding. At this point in time, I have no concern of us being able to finance this project in any way possible. It will be up to us in terms of how much we fund this project versus the other part of the portfolio in our purview. The other issue is interest rates are really fluctuating at this point in time. So it's really hard to predict where we're going to be at. We have an upside down interest curve right now where short-term rates are actually higher than long-term rates. But we expect that to flip back, and by the time we reach the point where we may want to borrow, we'll have a much clearer view of where we're going to be sitting. Thank you. Okay, I think I have Councillor Bell next, and Councillor Greenlaw after.
Thank you. Through the chair. Just a quick question on the cost per unit. I'm not understanding how that came to be. I'm just looking at the total cost of the project itself, and if I back that down and use the number of units, it seems to be quite a lot higher than with the estimated price of $400,000 per unit. Can maybe share how you came to that number?
Yeah, thank you for the question through the chair. What you're seeing is the residential cost per unit, so we're not allocating any of the commercial costs to that to keep it fair. So it's any of the costs that are attributed to the residential, or the residential share of the parking garage, the residential share of all the common spaces is what is going into that number. And then I think when I gave the number of roughly 450, that's the upper floors. So again, the more floors we add on, the better cost per unit we can achieve. And so that one, it's fairly easy. It's like works out to like 455. So if you take 10 million and divide by 22 units, it works out to $455,000 per unit.
All right, thank you. Now I have Councillor Greenlaw.
Thank you, Chair Leduc. You've mentioned a couple of times that the cost of inflation is worked into the number. What is the number you're using as a cost of inflation over 3 years? Because as Mr. Wilcox referred to, is that it's unpredictable at this point.
Yeah, thank you for the question. It is 10% in 23, 8% in 24, and 5% in 25. So as I mentioned previously, the firm that we were using that undertook this costing, they're a little more optimistic. And like I said, dropping it back to 5% inflation out 3 years from now. Some others are not as optimistic, right? Like I've looked at some where that is a higher number. In other words, a slower return to the normal 5% that we've been, but that's what we've used in this one.
Okay, I have Councillor Van Stareven.
Thank you, Chairman Leduc. Quick question in regards to that additional floor. To me, it's a bit of a no-brainer when we can get units in at $450,000. Question is, can we go higher? What are our restrictions? Because, like you say, the commons areas, all those, the costs are covered. So can you touch on that, please?
Yeah, thank you for that question, and through the chair. So there's two limiting factors. One is a planning zoning issue. I believe right now the highest we're allowed to go is 12, and again, that can be changed though. The other one is the soil. So I think we have a bearing capacity of about 300 kPa here. We know we can get to about 12 floors comfortably. Beyond that, it would take a little bit more detailed design. Obviously, you can build buildings bigger than that, but what happens is you reach a tipping point in the cost of your footings. And so right now, we're costed out like all of our structures is, you excavate, dig, and put in a shallow strip footing, as they call it. If we're to go higher and the soil can't take it, we're into deep well footings, as they call it, and you'll see a larger jump in construction costs now to do that. So those extra floors, we might be able to squeak one more in, but we're kind of about at the limit of what the soils can take without, like I said, taking that next big jump in construction cost.
Okay, and before I go to Councillor Smith next, can I get cards up over here? I have Councillor Gordon. Sorry, I'm just getting... So Councillor Smith, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mino and Brad and the team. Before I start, I want to make it clear that I have the utmost respect for you folks and the job you do, and Brad and his team, once the shovels hit the dirt, do an absolute phenomenal job and are second to none, in my opinion. But as I look at this particular project, I'm really struggling. And you've heard me say it in this House many times before, that, we're spending upwards between, I'm hearing numbers between $400 and I'm seeing numbers at $800 per square foot, or per unit, sorry, 1,000 per square foot. And I shake my head and say, how can we possibly be building these units at these prices and referring to them as affordable housing? These are prices that are at regular residential square foot pricing and higher. And then I look at the model that says, we like to tote, I guess, for lack of a better term, that we are building affordable housing units, which we are, but we're not building nearly as many as we need to be building, because we're now, putting units in these buildings that are at full market rent, or what we still call affordable housing, which is 10 or 20% below average market value. When we all sit in this House knowing full well that 10 or 20% below average market value is still not affordable for a vast majority of our people. And so I really struggle when I look at these projects today. And then I look at this one in Barrie, beautiful project, but now we're getting into having to build parking structures, and a parking structure that is at such a cost. If we didn't have a parking structure, or we all put our heads together and said, listen, we understand that people who need affordable housing often drive. But in this particular case in Barrie, a great city with great transit, everything fairly close that you would possibly need in any part of the city, why do we have to have even a half a car? Why can't we eliminate some of that? And if that means we have to look at people who don't drive, who need affordable housing to be in this unit, then so be it. We've got to look outside the box here. We know that above ground parking is just, the amount of units more that we could build and have people who need a roof over their head in a unit versus a place to park a car in a city that has all the transit and walkable viability one could probably want is mind-boggling to me. And I understand that staff are doing their best to make this work within the confines of the province and so on and so forth. But we've got an opportunity here, I think, to really put a lot of deserving people in a beautiful home with a roof over their head. And we're not reaching for the stars here, unfortunately. We're following that process, if you will, that says we have to have a half a car per space. We have to have this service or that service. When at the end of the day, I grew up in a poor family. The mayor of Barrie grew up in a poor family. I can tell you, when we needed a roof over our head, we didn't care if we had a parking space. We just didn't. We wanted a warm place and food in our bellies. So I have all the respect in the world, but I think we need to go back to the drawing board on this. And I also understand that, you know, when we reach the 12 floors in this case, we've got to go to a deep well type foundation. But if we look at that and say, okay, if we go to a deeper well type foundation, then let's shoot for the stars. Let's speak to the city and say, okay, we don't go 12 or 14 floors. Maybe we go 20. So we get back those economies that we lose, and we put more people who need homes in homes. I could go on forever, but I think that's pretty much the gist of my feelings. Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor, for your comments, and specific to your question on just design and compilation. I think there's a couple of things to share. I absolutely agree with the comments of whenever we get an opportunity to create affordable housing, we try to create as much as we can. I do think similarly, one thing we'd like to share, like the community housing model that happened 30 years ago, the rent geared to income 100% units. By all kind of analysis, it hasn't been the most successful from a social impact standpoint. So we do have to be careful as we intensify and build on, you know, build more intensely in one site, that we do still have a combination or mix of different types of income classes or groups, so that we don't repeat some of those kind of previous models that weren't too successful from a social impact standpoint. So I think the mixed income model and how much of it or the ratios can certainly be revisited and redefined. Secondarily, like with those towers, like in Toronto and some of the other urban areas that have 30-story towers and 20-story towers that were built 30 years ago, the capital cost and maintenance cost is a factor. And I think this is why we factor it in upfront, right? So that we're not asking or impacting the tax levy in future years on things like elevators and roofs and siding and the things that will have to come over time, over the life cycle of the building. In terms of parking, I think Brad can maybe speak to the per person or per person ratio on parking. I do want to remind, though, that this does include the community hub that will have a series of different agencies that aren't living there but working there, that will also probably be commuting from across the county or different service areas that will also need some semblance of a parking structure there as well. So it's not all due to the residential need, but it's also to the commercial space need as well. But maybe Brad can speak to the planning piece on that.
No, and I definitely appreciate your comments. So I've tried to avoid parking garages like the plague for many years, right? And they are a money pit, and we've tried to avoid it. On this one, I think Mina touched on it. We do have a lot of staff working at this building. So the parking alone for Ontario Works is well over 100 spaces. And then not to mention you have, if we have some of our other daycares or maybe it's our education partners. So there is parking required for staff and visitors. That said, we've tried and will continue to try to squish that number down. I believe the City of Barrie has a 0.6 ratios, what they consider a reduction for their affordable units. We'd actually be seeking a variance to go beyond that even and get as low as we can possibly go. So right now, I know if we poll all of our RGI and affordable buildings, if we look at the parking ratio to unit for all 30 of our buildings, it's in the neighborhood of like 0.44 to 0.5. It's in that range, and that's real. That's actually what people are driving. Some of that's going to be influenced, like you mentioned, Barrie's going to be very different with its transit versus some of the smaller communities where they are relying on their car more often. But this is squishing it down. The other thing is, and it does come an impact, is if we do have the full market units on those upper floors, chances are those people would have a car, and we would have. So what we've done is we've given one car for the full market units and then use the reduced ratio at all of the RGI units and affordable units. And then, of course, the commercial ratios are set by the city.
All right, thank you for those questions. So let me just review my list so I make sure I have everybody on it. So right now I have Councillor Dolan next. I have Barrie Mayor Nuttall, Councillor Snell, Councillor Compton, Councillor Follis, Councillor Gordon. Hamlin, I got you there. Yeah. Yeah, and I've got Follis there. I've got and Councillor Gordon. So I think I have and I'll get Councillor Fry now. So Councillor Dolan, and then Barry Mayor Nuttall.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, two questions. First of all, what is a move-in room?
Sure. Thank you for that question, through the chair. So one elevator typically in a building has, if you've noticed it, the doors on the back side. And so when people move in, you can imagine they're bringing in couches and all kinds of things that you'd hate to have them clog the lobby up where people are trying to walk in and out of the building. So typically there's it's almost like a hallway on the back side of one elevator. So if somebody's moving in, they would get what we call the service elevator. They can then unload, a lot of times too, the moving truck has to leave. So rather than dump all their furniture outside, they can actually unload the truck, bring it into the move-in room, and then whoever needs to move takes it in through the back of the elevator and up to the unit. So one elevator stays in service for all the regular residents to use, and they can go in and out of the building because it's not clogged up with furniture. And like I said, then the elevator becomes the service elevator for that tenant moving in.
Thank you. And my other question is regarding fees. So typically when you showed that list, Wasaga Beach, Bradford, all of the units that have been built recently, do we ask the local municipality to waive permit fees, and is it consistent across all builds?
Thank you for the question. So the short answer is no. It's a very different mix across. When social housing has done its call for proposal, often we did see the waiving of fees. So certainly Collingwood waived all fees, Wasaga Beach waived all fees, Victoria Harbour or Tay Township waived all fees. The city of Bradford did some, that we got. But it's very different. When we'll be going out for our next call for proposal, we'll be putting that in there that we do want fees waived, because absolutely it affects the soft cost number. And again, if this is a partnership and we're all trying to get costs down, any of those fees waived by municipalities are a big help.
Thank you. I'll be looking to my friends at the City of Barrie to answer that question. Thank you.
And just to note, Bradford did donate the land, and we have shared in some of the costs. So off to Barry Mayor Nuttall.
Thank you. And as much as I would love to answer that question, we're but 4 members of an 11-person council and unable to answer that for you. Just as a bit of a maybe a warm-up, I had the opportunity to meet with Minister Hussein last week when he was in town from the federal level. And it was a different conversation being at the table with him instead of across the aisle in Parliament. But the overall was this, is that the Housing Accelerator Fund, there's a lot of capacity type issues that they want to deal with, not necessarily the funding of an individual project. And there's the previous tranches, and then there's what's coming down the line, which I think I wanted to bring today to tell everybody the same thing that I'd heard, which is that if you have the ability to invest in either hard infrastructure or internal items inside of your municipalities to bring housing about, that's where the feds are looking for it. So just a little bit of a tidbit. In terms of, I just want to address a couple of the comments. The question earlier with regards to a variety of housing, a variety of types of units. It is incredibly important that this is not either 154 or 172 units of one means. And I don't know who said it earlier, but there was a comment with regards to growing up. I grew up in a housing project. There was 120 units, all the same, and there was 2 really good points there. It's got to be, you've got to have multiple, means there, so that those kids who don't have the opportunity can see some that do have opportunity, and the integration is taking place. Secondly, most of the time growing up, my parking spot was used for hockey, outdoor hockey. We didn't have a car, so we used it for that. So if there's any opportunity to reduce the parking footprint for the actual residential units, I'd certainly support that. And not only would I support that from the building level, but through Ontario Works and through the county, there's a system where individuals who don't have the means to have a vehicle can actually apply for a bus pass in the city of Barrie. The county helps support that. So it's really just cycling back through into the system of what we would want to see as a healthy individual community here in a broader healthy community. The inflationary costs, we hear 10.85 and the feds are saying it's going to be 3%. I'm actually nervous that the 10.85 is low, because we're not talking about inflation across the market. We're talking about inflation inside of construction materials. And 10.85, I think, is seeing the glass half full. I hope it's correct, but that makes me a little bit nervous. In terms of the parking above ground, how many parking spaces are we going above ground, and how many are going below ground?
Yeah, thank you for the question to the chair. Off the top of my head, I'm not sure. I know we maximized what we could. We're also have a number on the MTO lands. There is some, we can't count them towards the parking count, but we're allowed to have them. So there is a row along there. So we've put as much as we possibly can. Really the only space that we would have left, if you recall, actually you can see it in the image there, is the green space in the corner there where the park is, where everything else we've put as much surface parking as possible, again, just because of the cost.
And does the commercial subsidize the rest of the project?
Yeah, actually, the commercial component is extremely important. So the commercial rent intake is almost double what residential rent is. So the commercial rent is what's paying the lion's share of the bills, so that the other rents can be down at a more affordable level. So whenever we can get as much commercial there as possible, it makes a huge difference on the sustainability of the building. And again, they're the ones then carrying the load. What's different on this particular development versus some of the others is the amount of RGI we have. Typically, we would well, they're all affordable, so there'd be very little RGI or a small amount of replacement RGI like we would have in Collingwood. In this particular case, there's a significant number of those homes, like the 64, so it's a large number. The larger the number of RGI, then that rent has to be made up somewhere else in order for the building to be sustainable.
And when it comes to Ontario Works, what's the footprint of the current office space over on Bayfield?
Yeah, so the current office space on Bayfield is just over 30,000 square feet, 2 floors, so what's that, 136? This is slightly less than that. However, Ontario Works has been working with a number of partnerships with the province, and so actually some other provincial offices will also be in there, co-located right in Ontario Works, and then they're also cost sharing as well. So that means the share that Ontario Works or the county would need to pay is actually being reduced because of the co-location with some provincial offices as well.
And will Ontario Works be paying full rent there?
Absolutely, yeah. So Ontario Works is paying the rent over to Simcoe County Housing Corporation. Yeah.
And so therefore it goes back into the bottom line of future affordable housing bills.
Exactly. And that would be the same for any of the agencies, whether it be, licensed childcare or education partners, whatever. That rent is coming in and then going into the coffers to be able to maintain the building and creation of future affordable housing.
Thank you. I know that a couple of my colleagues will probably have questions at a later point too, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for those questions. All right, so next I have Councillor Snell, Compton, and Hamlin after.
Thank you, Chair Leduc. One of the things I wanted to ask, it's obviously a high focus to sort of focus on smaller spaces, just for sustainability and footprint. I don't see in any of the units, any of them to be considered for studios. And what made me sort of question that is that when you look at the 2,996 current households in Barrie, 71.2% of them have no dependents. So they're either seniors or no dependents. So I'm not seeing the balance there. If you wouldn't mind, please, to answer that. Thank you.
I could answer generally through the chair, and then I'll ask for the
the design team to kind of give specifics on square footage. I do think there's a couple of things. The flexibility is a little different with this composition, as my colleague, Mr. Spiewak, had shared. Because we're replacing 64 3 and 2 bedroom homes that are rent geared to income, as assistant service manager, we're mandated to maintain that service level that was downloaded to us from the province. So that kind of changes the flexibility on how to fit those in, and then do the rest at 2 1 bedrooms or bachelors. We did kind of consider that the square footprint is not that much difference in square footage between the 1 bedroom and what would be a smaller bachelor, in order to make up the difference on the rent revenue. So I think that's a part of it too. I think from a design too, you've got a limited space and square footage footprint that you're trying to fit all the needs that you're obligated to, versus some of the things that you may need to do. In terms of the 1 bedrooms, one other thing we're looking at is accessibility and flexibility for that accessibility for our older or aging population, which is also quite high in terms of our waitlist needs and in terms of our just demographic population, aging population needs. So being able to have that accessibility feature usually is more conducive to the 1 bedroom footprint than it is to the bachelor. So those are kind of 2 considerations, but they can speak if I didn't catch. Did I get it? That's exactly right. Yeah. Okay, he says I got it all.
Sorry, thank you. I appreciate that answer. I think any way to try to maximize units is most important, obviously, to try to get as much as lift as you can. The other comment I just wanted to make is I agree with your statement in regards to considering when doing housing projects like this, getting the mixed use so that you don't have the high community impact. As a former school trustee, we would see that where if a high dense population of this type of housing, the impacts and trickle downs into the schools that directly feed it are significant. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Cotton.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. My question is basically more long-term planning in the aspect of looking at the rate of cost of material going up over a period. I think it was partly answered, but I think that's a contingency that needs to be looked at. And the other factor is really the maintenance for the future of this, because you have a shelf life for material equipment in the building. Has that been considered for approach for the, I guess, long-term planning for that?
Through the chair, the answer is yes to both questions. So the first question is our 10-year plan, as GM Wilcox has shared, matches our long-term kind of capital needs and planning for developments of these projects. From a planning and strategic planning perspective, our affordable housing and homelessness prevention strategy is a 10-year strategy. We're in year 9 of that strategy, and we've kind of achieved and surpassed the goals we had set 9 years ago. We're in the process this year of working on a new 10-year strategy, which would map out that need similar to the demographic need and some of our wait list needs and affordability needs. In terms of capital planning for this specific project, all of our projects do map out a 50-year life cycle of needs from a large capital and everyday maintenance. So as you saw in the rent revenue chart there, that's the net revenue after we've deducted and contributed to our capital reserves per unit, as well as our parking infrastructure reserves per unit for those capital needs. So yes, those are all mapped out. So similarly, again, this is that unique design build here, is it's sustainable from the first day. And not sustainable after 20 years when things start to fail, and then you have to come back to council and ask for more. If you look at our nonprofit sector or our older rent geared to income properties, that's what we're seeing now. After 20, 30 years, there's a huge capital ask required that is levy funded because there wasn't that front end planning for the 50-year life cycle that we're doing here.
Excellent. Okay, I've got Councillor Howland.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I guess my main thought on this is I wish it was more ambitious. Having heard that there's 5,000 people on a waiting list, what's proposed here, of course, is less than 3% of those people could be accommodated. And given the crisis we're in every municipality, if I could take my pen to the paper, you know, I would probably double the height. But keeping in mind, and I'm very much in agreement with the advice we received, this would have to be a mixed income building. And although I'm not tremendously aware and, you know, intimately involved in, I guess, in it, but certainly the St. Lawrence neighborhood in Toronto, which you would know more about than me, where they've created some 3,500 units on obviously a much bigger site, but all income levels, seems to have been a huge success. And I just see this as a lost opportunity. And I have heard through, you know, I'll just say the grapevine, but, you know, until a building's 12 stories, it doesn't make financial sense for the private sector. It's hard to tell how high this is. It looks like it's about 8 stories. So I would try and maximize the use of all this land here and drive what we can do there. I heard the presentation about having a couple of levels of the parking garage underground so the residents wouldn't have to look at the wall of the parking garage. And I have seen in my somewhat limited travels, there's been a lot of creative ideas on how to disguise what above ground parking lot looks like. And I'm just wondering if we couldn't get a different design eye on the parking garage and make it look more acceptable, like if it, I don't know what it would look like, just say like another apartment building, I don't know. And so we could push the parking costs down by having them come out of the ground, because that is a huge amount of the cost of this project, is that parking garage. And then we can build maybe on top of the parking garage as well and have it all blend in. So that's, you know, my main comment. I don't know how you do it, obviously the mixed income, and, you know, there's a lot of different things on the table here. The costs of the project are really high, I think, because of what you mentioned about having to extend the services, the hard services, because they're not there. And, you know, that also speaks to making more use of those services, because the site services, not the hard services, the site services, because when I divided it up between the number of units, it comes out to almost 80,000 a unit, which seems high to me. You know, if we could get more units there. And in terms of the cost of, you know, let's say we were to, you know, take a pie in the sky approach and double the number of units here, obviously the cost of the project is significantly higher. And I'm wondering, in light of the Mayor of Barrie's comments about other federal funding coming down the pike, which sounds like for these kind of projects, we could have a look at the federal and provincial levels for more funding. We know that if these were at market rates, this would help allow some of the people who need affordable housing in Barrie, who work in Barrie, and, you know, what helps make Barrie a sustainable community, those people need to be housed too. So this wouldn't just be for, you know, anyway, I don't need to say any more about that. You know what I'm talking about. So anyway, the last comment I had, or question I had, was I noticed the financing, or the analysis of the finances did not include the financing costs. And I was wondering if we did include the financing costs, how that would look, how the picture would look. Thank you for that time.
Through the chair, thank you for the question. So as Jan Wilcox had shared, I think for us right now, this is more of a demonstration of what can be done with different options of composition. The actual financing piece, and I think this is one of those things that we do as a county, and you know, I can ask Jan Wilcox to kind of share a little bit more about that. But before, just the federal programming. So we are to be very clear, like our recommendation is option 3 or some iteration of option 3. I think that is the most value for money that we presented here today. So that's kind of staff's recommendation to council. The second thing is with federal and provincial financing, we do have some provincial and federal combined programming so far, and we are absolutely committed to continue exploring new opportunities with the federal government, with the acceleration fund that Councillor Nuttall had shared with the council. One thing, though, to be mindful is they do come with rent restriction amounts, meaning, you know, the building's overall average would have to be 80% of AMR, which is good from the affordability side, but it might not be able to achieve that mixed income model that I think is very important to this. But those are things we will explore, and I think some of those conditions at times can be negotiated. But so for these models, just to flag for that $8 million or I think it's $6 million or $8 million contribution from the province, we are locked into 24 units that have to average 80% of market. And then when you add on to that the 64 RGI units, you're going from like deep affordability to strong affordability. So that in order to balance that mixed income, you have to start introducing 100% of average market rent or above in order to make that balance. But if, you know, GM Wilcox can share a little bit more about financing.
Certainly. Thanks for the question. As I talked earlier about, it is a tough number to come up with at this point in time in terms of a broad estimate. But I would say with the model that we have right now, we've got a contribution that comes back to us. In the option 3, it's about, we're estimating about $79 million. That would go a long way towards financing, but it wouldn't cover all of it. It would most likely be just short of what the financing costs would be, depending upon how much funding we could potentially get. If we get zero, then it would cost us in terms of carrying costs for that kind of financing if we needed to do it for this project. As I said, though, I look at the financing as a whole across the county. So we have projects that range from roads to bridges to long-term care facilities, now to social housing. It's really a portfolio, and we choose how much of that portfolio we're going to finance. So at this point in time, we've been very fortunate where over the past few years, we've been able to pay back most of the projects that we've had to finance. We do have some financing specifically right now that's directed at paramedics. But our carrying costs are very low because of that. So we've essentially got zero costs and then a small chunk that have some costs. So when you look at the weighted average cost of capital across the county, it's extremely low. That will gradually go up a little bit as we start to borrow. So then I could speak a little more specifically of those costs at that time. But it's very difficult to have an exact number for you. But I can say our ability to borrow will well more than cover this project. We have a significant amount of borrowing power, so that is not the concern. And according to our long-term financial plan, we have the ability to pay that back too, because the future revenue within the county will be able to handle that. Thank you.
As a follow-up, Chair, just briefly, I totally understand the county could afford this, but my point more is, first, I think every project such as this we're building, and it's a significant project, it would be helpful, I think, for the House to know what is the cost of the project to build, including the financing, because we all know if we buy a house or any investment property, there's the cost of building it, but there's the cost of carrying it until it gets paid for. And I think not only for our own interest, but also in terms of lobbying at the senior levels of government, I think it would be helpful to be able to say, here's the construction costs, here's the carrying costs, like, you know, put your money on the table. I mean, you guys are crying about how much housing we need, putting the finger on all the municipalities and the second tier as well to come up with the housing. Okay, here's the costs. Like, I don't think we should be hiding any of the costs. Okay, so anyway, that's all I want to say. Thank you.
Just to follow up, if I may, I totally agree with you. Thank you very much. There is a cost figure that's in the business case. So right now, the cost that we're shouldering within that case as a county is $100 million. So that is the number that we're going to external organizations saying we are carrying $100 million of that right now within that project, and we would like to have funding to apply towards that. So that's the way that we're proposing to do it, rather than saying we have X dollars of financing costs. We feel that that's a stronger case to be made. Thank you.
Okay, I have Councillor Gordon and then Councillor Follis, and then I have Councillor Evans after. Fryer and Evans. Go ahead.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair. I've got a couple questions and a couple observations, and potentially an amendment that we could put onto the floor here. Just first of all, that sound wall for a couple $1 million. It's 14 feet high. All the people live well above the sound wall. What's the rationale for, we could save this much money if we don't put a sound wall in, and the tenants that are on the commercial level, they may hear the cars driving by all day, put in thicker glass or something. Not overly concerned. Just wondering, how does, from an engineering perspective, maybe just I don't understand, why is it important to have a sound wall if the people live well above it?
Yep, no, thank you for your question. And through the chair, it's a very good observation. So the sound wall may not be needed actually in all areas. So we're hoping we can get it reduced. The other thing is there is play spaces outside. So especially with children, not necessarily the formal playground you can see is on the front side or on the Rose Street side. But when they do the acoustic studies, again, even if the children are out there and playing, some cases you do have to build the wall anyways. And obviously, to your point, it is 14 feet. You're deflecting the sound up and over them. So it's more for the people on the ground outside than it is necessarily the residents living up high in the building. Because you're right, we actually do, they're heavy paned windows that have great acoustic characteristics and not near as much gets through. And then actually the building itself is a giant sound wall, right? And we'll often find, typically the residents across the street will notice a huge difference of they won't actually hardly hear the highway anymore should the building be built there.
Thanks for clarifying that. So, I'm just looking for potential ways to save and really maximize what we're trying to do here, which is build homes. So I appreciate that. The next one is kind of the elephant in the room, is the DC forgiveness that's being kind of imposed by the province. This could work in our favor. We're arguably building affordable housing, therefore we would not have to pay development charges to the City of Barrie, which I'm sure really sucks to be the City of Barrie when we're proposing this. So I'm just wondering how we deal with that in this House amongst ourselves and manage the requirement or the option to not pay development charges. And also, because they were proposing this mixed income, which I totally support, I'd rather not just us erect large things that could become ghettos. Does that negate our ability to, enjoy the development charge forgiveness? In my experience in our little municipality, I've had developers come forward with plans where they want to do mixed, and I haven't got a clear answer from the province on whether we can use that or leverage that, of course, or how we're going to be made whole, because there's nothing in the budget to make us whole.
Through the chair, thanks. Thank you for the question, Councillor. For the sound wall and things like that, I think one thing to remember, these are just renderings, and we're at Class B right now. So when we start getting into detailed design and understand where the needs are, we would definitely be taking that approach to minimize costs wherever we can. And that's what we've done in our previous bills as well. So from today's concept to when we start tendering, that's where we'll start understanding the absolutes that need to be put in by planning requirements or structural design requirements. Certainly we would be taking into consideration anywhere where we can reduce the cost of the overall project. In terms of development charge and collection, I think I'll ask my colleague Gian Wilcox to kind of understand a little bit more about that.
Thank you very much. I would defer to our treasurer, Leland Sibic, and I also want to introduce Michelle Sims. She's one of our directors in finance who has done a significant amount of work on the modeling regarding social housing and supports Mina's area. Thank you.
So through the chair, the development charges are exempt for this property. the impact of the development charges before Bill 23 and after, of course, are significant, but the development charges that would be charged, since it is a social housing residential, are exempt. I don't know if that answers your questions.
Thanks. So it was exempt before Bill 23. All right, that's good. Good to hear, I guess. Someone has to pay for that, though. The parking lot. I hadn't really considered the parking in my original contemplations about this, but Councillor Smith really, I think the conversation that's ensued has really got me thinking about this, and again, the costs of that raised parking garage is some $18 million estimated. You know, I would be quite happy if it got the support here to simply say, let's amend this and remove the parking garage from the equation entirely and substitute it for something that's like a paved lot that could have some EV chargers. Clearly, there would have to be space reserved for the tenants that are paying market rates because they are going to have cars. But the folks that are getting in at rent-geared income and whatnot, I think we have to be realistic here too. It's awful nice to live like you're rich, which having a car really is a luxury these days, even though it's also a necessity. But the City of Barrie, to their credit, has an amazing transit system and subsidies. And this is right on a route. It's within very short walking distance to major shopping centers and Bayfield Street and what have you. So I'm just wondering if it would be worth looking at that significant savings and leading sort of by example and not building a parking structure and just having, you know, one flat paved surface, you know, a semi-permeable. We can use all the fancy stuff that people like to hear about when it comes to parking, and maybe some EV chargers. So that's one comment. I don't actually want to put it as an amendment. I just want to see right now if there's any appetite on the floor. I'd be happy to move it. My last sort of comment question was about higher density. Again, we look at the Lakeshore Boulevard condos in Toronto, for example. I've had friends that bought those. I mean, they were staggeringly expensive, but they're like 500 or 600 square feet, and they're really cleverly designed. I still wouldn't want to live in one, but they're cleverly designed to, you can survive a small family, a very small family, or to your point, the people that have no dependents could very easily live in those small spaces, and they're well crafted and very convertible. Could we consider higher density without having to go to the added expense of these extra footings and building up by simply creating some higher density, smaller type units like what we see in downtown Toronto? Again, somebody who's going to get a very cut rate place to live, I think it's reasonable to expect that wouldn't be the same kind of apartment someone who's paying $2,000 a month to live in. I know they'd like that, but I think the reality is we can get more bang for our buck and manage people's expectations. Has there been any contemplation about increasing the density by minimizing the actual footprint of each unit?
Through the chair, thank you for the question, Councillor. I think I often say we have to be careful on what we compare ourselves to when it comes to developments in different municipalities and areas. I mean, condominium building is for profit, and so maximizing, density is also maximizing the profit margins. The other thing too is in those developments, they're handing you the property without a future capital strategy. Here we're doing something different, and quite the opposite. In terms of overall intensification of density, I do think, again, mixed income communities is not just based on income, but on size of family compositions. If you start doing a lot of over-intensification of bachelors and one-bedrooms, you tend to see what we've seen historically with our rent-geared-to-income models, where the social constructs get to become a little bit challenging. Overall intensification is always a good thing, I think, but Brad can talk to you more about the design specifications of why we're where we're at right now in terms of square footage. And again, I just remind you that we are limited with some of our mandate of specific unit types that have to be replaced from the sale of the single family homes. So that's based on that commitment that we have to meet our mandate. The remaining square footage has to be redesigned in a way to make sense, and then balance out your mixed income needs, your mixed family use needs, and your revenue needs. But Brad can talk to you about square footage a bit.
Yeah. Thank you for that, and through the chair. The selling of the houses right now, a lot of those houses are 3-bedroom. We even have some 4s. I believe there's even a couple of 5-bedrooms. So we've squished what was RGI units and what could be a 4 or 5-bedroom house into a 3 bedroom apartment. So that's already a pretty big squish down if you want to think of it that way. When it comes to the upper floors, though, your thoughts are valid. And internally, we did actually have some of those discussions with Jim Wilcox and Mina as well. That can be an option if we wanted to look at. So right now, the upper floors, the extra floors that we're adding are a mirror image of the floor below it. So there's that same mix of 1s, 2s, and 3 bedrooms. We could make them all 1 bedroom on the top floor to get more than the 11 units. So those options do exist, which would increase the unit count on some of those upper floors. But we can't do all of it. And again, going back to the point that Mina made, is we're replacing, family homes. So that was where some of that restriction, or I guess if we want to think of it as was a self-imposed guideline that we tried to maintain family housing, because we still need family housing in Barrie, right? So we wanted to make sure that that was preserved, albeit just moved on to a different site.
Okay, thank you. I've got 6 more speakers to go for sure. We've had great discussions. Okay, more coming in here, but we've had great discussions, so we're going to carry on with discussion before we put any options on the floor for recommendations or whatever, because I think we're getting around to the point, but I'll call up Councillor Follis next.
Thanks. Through the chair, to start, I had some comments, but also something I wanted to put forward eventually, and I wondered, is it better to save my comments till the end and maybe you come back to me? Is that preferable?
You can put your comments on the floor now if you'd like, if it's a comment.
The sense I get just in talking with staff is there's still a lot of comments to come forward, and so I don't want to interrupt the debate or anything like that.
How about I come back to you then?
That's
okay?
perfect. Sounds good.
Okay, so I'll go to the next speaker, which is Councillor Fry.
Thank you, Chair. And after all the discussion, it's hard to not expect that my question is going to touch on areas that you've already talked about. I apologize for that, but I'm sure glad Collingwood and Wasager Beach were built when they were built. Anyway, when you've prepared your pro formas of the options you brought forward to us, I'm sure these are the best options. It includes the 900K or so per year that helps with the financing answer of the over the long term. And to me, funding is critically important in the whole thing. When you've studied the parking garage, you obviously would have modeled for units to go on top of that, to build apartments on top of the structure, because you look at it and you say, could you add another floor of parking and put 4 or 5 floors of apartments there? But I understand what you talked about when you start to get in and your points start to change, right, with construction costs and funding. So did you incorporate an option and just not decide to move it forward to us in regards to a combination of parking and units on top?
So through the chair, thank you, Councillor. The answer is yes. We're still, we were still discussing and exploring what can be done in terms of maximizing the space of the footprint of the parking lot. And Brad can kind of share some of the limits that we have there from a structural standpoint. There's also a neighborhood that's less than 6 feet off the edge of the back end of that parking garage. I think it's quite close. 6 meters. So there's also a community impact of the existing community that's also a consideration.
Okay. Yeah, thank you through the chair. So just to add a little bit, I think just to even go back on some previous questions or comments that were made, we did not want to do a parking garage, and this is unfortunate with the size of site we have and with the number of units that we have, even with reducing the parking ratios as low as we can possibly go. You could never remove the parking garage. It's 3 levels, and then take those 3 levels and make it surface parking. But again, that was our goal. That's where we'd always start to not do it. So what we've tried to do is reduce it as much as we can, but then also put it in a position where, from a neighborhood point of view, it's the least intrusive to the single-family homes that are around it. So you notice the larger buildings, we've pushed back to try to make a streetscape. The parking garage, we have a playground in front of it. And I think there were some other comments made about, making the parking garages a little more attractive. And so that's something that'll happen. And then the parking garage is hidden by a little bit of green space. And also, like I said, we've tried to blend it as much as possible, only push 1 row or 1 floor underground, 2 above, to try to keep the costs and keep the parking garage as low as we can, that the residential units look over it. So that's kind of where we've sat. Now, the opportunity to add more on top of the parking garage, definitely there is that option that could be out there. Obviously, there'll be cost implications, and again, when it comes to NIMBYism or neighborhood reaction, that's obviously a wait to be seen. But certainly, we've tried to, having done a number of these, and you pick up a lot of things that local neighborhoods can manage or not manage, and that's what we've tried to do, is to try to make that most manageable for this site and this amount of intensification in the neighborhood.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up with that, I can understand you're looking at it from an overall impact to the area. Intensification is going to happen, and more of this situation is going to be there. What we, in my opinion, need to look at, and I'd be very interested in seeing it, what it would do to the overall costs and how many units we could get in there. And I do agree fully with the mixed income situation, because I think diversity is the other key here. You want to make sure that it's a mixed community situation. Therefore, I do think you'll need parking. And I understand that some of the people who will be taking these units maybe aren't in that true affordable area, but that probably frees up in other areas where they would be renting anyway. So I guess if there be the way possible to look at that as an option as well, with the apartments on top and how many would work, and again, that whole idea, the pro forma working out so that the financial costs are incorporated, so to speak, I'd be very interested in seeing that. Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, so I have Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair, and through you to General Manager Faiz Bagat. Top level, I don't want to belabor the parking garage. We've been going over that. I'll just come out and say that I believe you said, Director Spiewak, that there's 100 people that work at this facility, and I do believe that obviously you're going to have parking for them. I'm not an architect, but looking at the drawing, I think it would be nicer to be closer to the 400 than in the neighborhood, but I'll leave that up to you. But first, high level, just with regards to that, and it relates to the commercialization. I'm always about how we make more money at this site, and you mentioned that there's opportunities for commercialization or commercial use in the ground level of the facility. I might venture that the parking lot could also be a source of commercial income for people that I assume you're going to have security on there. So you're going to have an access system, so that's an opportunity maybe moving forward. But then I'll leave that. Let me just continue on. You can answer both at the same time. The second thing is I look at this picture, and you're in a community. You're in a community of people that have established homes. This is right off of, I just Googled it, it's right off of the Highway 26, 27 cutoff. And perhaps there's a councillor from Barrie that handles this area. How you've got 100 people working there, you've got 174 possibly units, that's probably 500 people that are moving into that community. Have we taken into consideration how that's going to affect the community moving forward? And then I also think, I hark back to what General Manager Sinclair talks about with some of our Innisfil and multi-generational emphasis and integrating these large facilities into a community. And I know there's been some undercurrent of people that I luckily in my life have never had to be in subsidized housing, but of the impacts of having single income, and I'm certainly in favor of mixed income, but being a positive impact to the community and not a negative one. Is there opportunity for this to be almost like a community hub type concept and something there for the people that are in this neighborhood that are going to be impacted by this regardless, right? There's a lot of cars, there's a lot of traffic, and a lot of people coming in. Have we given any consideration to how we make this a positive impact in the town of Barrie? Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor, for the questions. For in terms of the use of the space in terms of the commercialization. One thing with the parking, just to make a point of clarification, this is revenue generated parking. So both residents and commercial tenants would be charged a parking fee. The revenue for that gets contributed to our parking capital reserve that pays for future capital costs of the structure. In terms of community integration, and I think with mixed income communities, the model has been very clear that as you strike a good balance of inclusion and diversity within the building or with the community you're building, you'll also see that integrate more into the neighborhoods surrounding it. I think Councillor had shared an example of the St. Lawrence Market model in the 1970s in Toronto and others. So yeah, this could be kind of the beginning of a different approach than one we've done in the past where it's been solely affordable. This one would be introducing that. In terms of the parks, and I think in Collingwood and other community development sites, those parks are for the public. So there's another way to introduce and invite others from around in the neighboring areas that previous to this structure there is nothing. We'll have an opportunity to use those amenities as well. I think on the top too, what I've seen in other places like Regent Park and in York Region, the community gardens that are done on the rooftops, which this one would have planter boxes. Sometimes there's these local green initiatives where neighbors from other parts of the community participate in gardening and other types of activities. So there's lots of opportunities to integrate. We are also having a community service hub there, where not only does it have the social services like Ontario Works and ODSP, but a childcare facility on the ground floor, which again would be open to access not just by residents with their children in the building, but across the neighborhood, something that would be new to the community. As well as we're exploring health services and access to primary care opportunities in some of the commercial spaces, community or social enterprises for community kitchens or some sort of restaurant or some sort of facility that caters to the whole larger neighborhood. So lots of different opportunities. As you said, this is a great investment, not just for affordable housing for those who may need it and utilize it, but also for the neighbors are being introduced to services that never existed prior to there. So yeah.
Just through you, Chair. Perfect. That answers all my questions, and I'm fully in support of this project. Thank you very much.
Okay. Next, I have Councillor Burkett.
Thank you, Chair. My question's been asked and answered. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you don't have anything new to add to it, please state that. So, Councillor Nugizi.
Thank you, Councillor. Thank you, Chairman. I like the presentation. The presentation is great. And can you come and give this presentation to the City of Barrie? Is that okay?
Through the chair, sure. Absolutely, yes.
All right. And my other question is, what are the total soft cost per unit, DC and extras? That's 20%.
Thank you for that question through the chair. We apply a 20% factor for soft costs across the board. So again, that broken into per unit, I'm not sure off the top of my head, but we do it as a percentage.
All right.
And it's fairly typical. Like I've seen, in projects where you have a lot less design work and not as many approvals, you might get down to 12% kind of thing. They probably, average 15 to 18, right? Depending on how long it goes, how many consultants are engaged, and for how many years kind of thing, right? So 20 is a county standard that's applied to all projects.
Good. All right. My other question is, the location is great. The city is beautiful, but why are we stuck on the 12 story? That's my biggest concern. Why not 20? Why not 30? As you know, our aging population significantly increasing, and we need more houses. And changing the zoning bylaw is, one of the major issue. Me and my colleagues can work with the City of Barrie to make sure it gets approved, and why not we can increase the building, or in my opinion, I think instead of having, two buildings, it's better to have one, tall, beautiful, big buildings and more units.
Through the chair, I think as we've shared a little bit earlier, the current way of the foundation, the structure of what we're putting in, the maximum would be 12 on each tower. Right now, we're demonstrating in option 3, 10, and 12. So that's the maximum. As Director Spivak had shared earlier, in order to explore higher and taller, you'd have to then start to recost the difference that you'd have to do below ground in order to support the structure in that area. And then certainly, again, we'd have to address the site plan with the City of Barrie after you exceed that height limit that's currently set on the site. So that would require an amendment and a whole process, which we would still be undergoing regardless for this project anyway. So I think, I mean, is there any?
Yeah, through the chair. So as staff, we can see we've had a number of varying opinions. So we were trying to balance what's a reasonable height that we can go from a neighborhood and NIMBYism point of view, a reasonable height that balances what we're allowed in planning, and then also, you know, a corresponding cost that's going to be generated from that. But certainly, we defer to the direction of council. If council would like us to examine going higher, we can do that. But you can understand, you can probably use that, $5 million a floor for each one you add. Your point is correct. The most economical thing is one building, right? You can reduce the length of the footings, reduce the number of elevators. There's lots of things you can do if you can get it all under one roof. Just the trick, it's again, just that height in the neighborhood and trying to fit with the neighborhood is where some of those decisions came from. And so we try to fit in community norms, as we would say, or what we think the neighborhood can manage and handle.
Okay, so I've got a few others. So I won't go back to seconds until after, potentially. I've got a few more that want to talk. I got Cabell, Sandu, Hamilton, and Anderson. So I'm going to go to Councillor Cabell.
Thank you very much, Chair. And through you, just a couple of observations real quick. Number one is listening to the comments from everyone. We can't have everything, obviously. I'm not a big fan of the parking lot, but I have to understand that even people in low-income situations do have vehicles, and they're not necessarily going to use public transit just because it's available, because it might still not be conducive to get them where they want to go. But the other comment I wanted to speak on is this appears to be Rose Street, immediately north of Bayfield Street, where the off-ramp is to the highway going northbound, where that's the location if folks aren't familiar with it. And I noticed that the playground is facing onto Rose Street, and we're talking about this wall, and in my mind, initially that wall seemed to be a barrier at the side of the highway. And the only reason I bring that up is, A, the playground was mentioned, but I really don't see how that sound barrier would, in fact, benefit the playground when it's facing onto Rose Street. I can allude to one that's right at Fruitland in the QEW, immediately adjacent to the highway by the service road, and there's a big parkette there with a water park and a splash pad. So I guess my comment would be, if there's no specific regulation that basically determines that we must put in a sound barrier at that location, I would suggest that that be the first thing to be forfeited and save the $2 million right off the top. If there's no obligation to put it in place, the building's facing Rose Street, and as one of the other councillors mentioned, it's not going to do anything for anybody who's up 2 or 3 floors anyway. And the new development along the QEW, if you do drive out that way, Stony Creek area, you'll see there's a lot of high-rise buildings, and there are no sound barriers put in there as they are in St. Catharines, let's say. So that's just my comments. I appreciate that. Thanks.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor, for your counsel. Yeah, we agree. Again, we'll explore any opportunity. If it's not necessary, it wouldn't be included in the final costing in the plan development.
Okay, thank you. So we've heard all sorts of scenarios, and if we can get the questions, that's what we're trying to get to. So I don't want to cut anybody off, but I want to make sure you get your questions in. So Councillor Sandu next, and then Councillor Hamilton.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank my colleagues for all the questions and comments around the chambers. So I won't repeat any of it. The only comment I have is we talked about parking lot. We have to keep in mind that in this day and age, a vehicle is not just for leisure services or leisure enjoyment. It is also a tool for employment. So I just want my colleagues to keep that in mind. People rely on that vehicle for all the delivery jobs, whether it's Uber Eats, Uber, or any other kinds. So just keep that in mind, please. Thank you.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Hamilton.
Hi, thank you. I just want to take a minute to commend staff, because I think what you've presented here is a very balanced project. It's easy for us to sit back and say, build 30 stories, make them all, rent-to-geared units, get rid of the parking and make a paved parking area. I think you've done your homework and your research. I think what you've presented is well balanced from a height perspective, considering the neighborhood community. I think what we're hearing is maybe it would be interesting just to look at the cost benefit of doing the deeper footings and adding another 10 stories or so, again, recognizing the needs of the neighboring communities as well, because they're all single dwellings there. But again, I think you've represented a balanced approach to the mixed income gearing units in there as well, based on past projects. So again, I commend you on that. And again, the parking. $18 million in parking. None of us want to, that's a tough pill to swallow. But again, I think you've done your homework, and we need to have parking available for the higher income units. We need to have parking available for the commercial space. So it's tough. I hear everyone's comments today, but I really, really appreciate the work that you've done. The reports you have put together are phenomenal. I read them, tried to come up with questions, and everything is in there. So a big thank you. I look forward to you coming to City Council. It would be interesting for me to hear feedback from other council members and also from the public in that specific ward as well, just to hear their thoughts. Again, I think this is a great project, considering, what they dealt with in the winter as well in the temporary shelter. So I believe this would be welcomed. No comments. I know you wanted questions, so I'll get to my question. In terms of the commercial space, again, I think that's great. It'll help subsidize the project going forward. I do wonder if you've reached out to other social services and community services, Elizabeth Fry and others, about the opportunity to co-locate, because I think this is a great opportunity to build more of that social service hub that we continue to talk about and have not delivered on yet.
Through the chair, thank you, Councillor, for the comments and the question. Yes, so we're constantly seeking out our partners to be a part of this program. In fact, we have some meetings later this week to start with that sector to discuss how they can be on site and serve. A lot of it is just like at the time of the drafting of this report, certain partnerships haven't yet been finalized. I think when we get closer, we'll come back with an update of who's in and what they're doing, and the different unique programs that we'll try to introduce that haven't been offered in other past projects as well. So I look forward to it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Anderson.
Thank you. Through the chair, since we've all come to the conclusion that the parking garage is needed, what about the parking spaces on the backside? Is there an opportunity to actually increase the footprint and create units that way, when we already know we're going to have to use the parking garage, so we can maximize the space there? Just looking at the total overall scale of the property, and if there's any opportunity with eliminating the open parking and increasing the footprint to the building.
Yeah, thank you for the question. The surface parking, we actually do need it. If we took some of that surface parking away, it would result in the higher cost parking that would have to be included inside the parking garage. Footprint wise, again, we've pretty much cubed out the site. So the buildings are about as big a footprint as they can be. We still have to get, you can imagine trucks and traffic around the building. And the parking structure, we've, again, trying to balance. We could make a smaller parking structure, but then it's going to get higher. So we've tried to make it as big as we can to reduce the number of floors, which increase costs. So we've kind of played that game a little bit to try to optimize it best we can. Even adding the extra floors on, we're not adding extra parking spaces. Like, that's the other thing I know, again, just going back to the parking structure, as it is a popular topic. But even adding those extra floors on, we're not adding spaces to the parking garage. So we're continuing to squish the parking ratios down on the existing tenants, those RGI tenants that we can, because we can't really adjust the commercial, as it was most mentioned.
Okay, I've got through the list once. We've had over 20 speakers. I think it's been a great conversation, great ideas out there, and I really think that this project is well balanced. I thank Councillor Hamilton for saying that. This project is well balanced because it's taking the maximum footprint that we can do without getting into deep well foundations and any other unknowns that could be below grade. So I like the project. I think the best, I don't know if they've ever heard of it, IPD, Integrated Project Design, where you have upfront costs, but you control your costs later on in the project. It actually stops the change orders that come in, and that's where your costs can escalate on projects like this. I think there's two things here. The sooner we get to tender, the better, because we control our material costs. Once you get your material costs laid out, they don't change. It's your labor costs that can change after, and that's the real big one there. So really, the sooner we get this project rolling, the better we control that inflation cost that Mayor Nuttall talked about. So this, to me, is a great project. So I'm going to now go back to people, and I've got, Councillor Smith, did you have more to add to this okay, and I've got Councillor Bell also that wanted to add to this conversation. Last two, and then I'll go to Councillor Follis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thanks for the opportunity to speak to the House once again. So, great conversation. It's enlightening, and it gives you a good feeling to know that we all care as much as we do in this House. That's why this conversation is what it is. But I'll get to my point. So, I understand completely the concern about creating. We've heard the term ghettos. We've heard the terms that we don't like to hear, but it is what it is, and we've seen that in the past. And the county has taken over different locations. Matthew Way and Collingwood's a prime example of that, and cleaned it up and fixed the issues there. But there is a sector of folks, if you will, in the affordable housing sector that require affordable housing probably as much or more than anybody, and that's our seniors population. I think we probably have more seniors requiring affordable housing nowadays than any other demographic. And so, I think that if we look at this footprint, we heard moving one building out, that creates more surface parking lot and going up on the other building. I think those options absolutely should be looked at. That's going to alleviate possibly a parking garage. It's a ton of money. And adding to the top, but as we look at the more geared to income, if you will, or the lower level of affordable housing, then perhaps we look at that section of the building for more geared to seniors. I mean, other than my beautiful mother, rest her soul, being as rowdy as she is, most seniors are not that rowdy, and they're not creating a lot of problems within our affordable housing sector. They're the type of tenant we'd probably rather have than anyone else when it comes to issues or problems. So perhaps we look at adding more of that. Some smaller units then can also be put in place on the upper floors. And why not give our seniors the best view possible? So I think if we look at those types of things and adding more seniors to these types of projects, and it also gets seniors more integrated with the community, I think it's a great opportunity. So I support it 100%, but I think that we really need to go back to the drawing board, look at a couple of other things. And again, that's not a slight to staff, because we know you folks are phenomenal at what you do, and certainly do your homework. But I'd like to see a little more on this. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you for those comments. Councillor Bell.
Yeah, actually, mine is just more. I think it's been a great conversation. I do support this project. I think it's well needed, but I do think, similar to Councillor Smith, I think that we can do a little better, whether it be the height of the building, and that's not up to us. That's up to you guys, are the professionals. But I would love to even just defer this until we can revisit looking at how we add more units to that. I don't want to put this off for a year, 2 years, or 3 years, but I think that if we could just maximize it or somehow work it into an option 5, that was just my suggestion, to put something like that on the floor.
Okay, we'll come back to that in a second. I'm going to go to Councillor Follis. We'll get into options then now, if that's what people want.
Thanks. Through the chair, a couple comments. One, I wanted to say the last councillor there, Councillor Bell, I believe took the words right out of my mouth as I was thinking about putting forward an option along those lines. I wanted to say, first of all, the discussion that I've heard is really encouraging. I think it's great to hear about increasing density and also doing our best to try to reduce parking as much as possible. I would hope that if something moves forward with an alternative option, that staff consider some different things. One thing that immediately comes to mind is, and I think I've heard it raised already, was over the parking garage, looking at increasing units there, but I'm sure that'll be kind of more up to staff. And then the other thing I wanted to say too, just kind of a last comment on this was, I think the demand is there. We all recognize this, that we could have 5 of these ready tomorrow and we could fill them very quickly. So I think the need, there's not a question of need. What I wanted to do is I wanted to put forward an alternative that would ask staff, ask for referral to staff to increase, to come back with an alternative option that would look at increasing, I think I'm going to keep it general, the number of units available that we could look at. Initially, when I was doing this, I was looking within the confines of option 3. My immediate concern with option 3 was that compared to option 1, so where it's got 64, option 1 has 64 RGI, 80% AMR, option 3 is not as affordable. There's not as many units in that 80% AMR, and I think that's really important that we at least keep that option 1 as, I guess, what I would consider a base level. But I will keep the option general and just ask staff to look at, report back on an option that increases density and increases affordability as well. So those are my 2 big comments. I don't know if staff have something prepared along those lines, but I would ask for council committee support on the matter. Thanks.
So that's an alternative to a mix of option 1 and 3 that you're proposing to see if we can get more affordable units or more density. Okay.
As well as affordability, improving affordability on option 3, basically.
Affordability on option 3. So do I have a seconder to discuss this on the floor? Well, we'll wait and see if we get a seconder after. How's that? Because I think I'll have other people talk. I have, Mayor, did you want to speak on?
Yes, thank you. So I think there's a couple of things for us. Firstly, I think that this rendering doesn't totally tell the whole story and maybe tells an interesting map of Barrie in the sense that on the far side of the site there is the on and off over to Bayfield. There is walking over to grocery stores, to my second home known as Canadian Tire. There's lots of options that's in terms of walkability here, if not transit. The second piece that I just wanted to speak to is, you know, we do have the idea that timing and time is money here is something we have to pay attention to. And is it ever going to be perfect? No. I think that our public servants would probably tell you that be the first ones to tell council that. So if we spend a lot of time looking into a lot of different opportunities that I'm sure have probably been looked at to this point, it's more dollars spent on less units, which ultimately throughout, you know, life cycle of affordable housing in Simcoe County as a whole costs us units and therefore costs individuals roofs over their heads and homes and opportunities and all those things. And so I would hesitate to say hold the current process to be able to then come back and increase it by 20 units or 30 units, because we know that it's going to take longer than 30 days. It's going to take longer than 60 days. The reality is we're going to get into the summertime, then it'll be October, November, and that's just a lot of time and a lot of money that we're going to expend, and I'd prefer we just proceed. As Councillor Hamilton said, this has gone from a site that was purchased for affordable housing to a site that was used for a temporary shelter. My gut is, having knocked on the doors around it, that this is a place that is going to accept this and be supportive of it. And so, you know, we don't always get that opportunity in Barrie, to be honest with you. You know, there is a lot of densification happening, and it isn't always popular. I think in this scenario, what's being proposed will be popular. Having said all of that, if there are opportunities that our public servants identify that they feel would be more units over the next little while as you're honing in on your plan, I would ask that you don't walk away from them, bring those back to the committee of the whole or to county council, however I guess, to this committee, and let us know, because I don't think that, I think that there's always efficiencies to be found, and if they are found, I would like us to take advantage of them.
So we are in committee hall right now, so we do have 2 weeks to deal with this at any level we want. So I do have I'm going to put your motion on the floor for now, and it's that item, CCW 2023-061, be referred to staff to report further on maximizing residential affordable housing unit density. However, with the affordable rental costs as outlined in option 1. So option 1 has the 90 units at 80% ARA, so he's looking to, so if you understand the motion, is it something we can put on the board, John? So that's a motion on the floor right now. I've got people that want to speak. Is it a second or just to speak to the motion? You're going to second. Okay, Councillor Bell has seconded. So let's go to comments and questions. So I'm going to go with Councillor Corbell, Councillor Measures, and then Councillor Ripma.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'll just keep it short. I think what I've heard so far is option 3 presents us an opportunity basically to better subsidize the entire project with folks that are going to be paying market rate. What I guess I'm trying to understand is this number 61, which seems, is that a hard number that is going to benefit from specific funding, and that's why it's 61? I just want to know whether or not we're in a position to actually do what the motion is proposing, or if that 61 is just going to remain the same. Thank you.
Through the chair, thank you for the question, Councillor. The 64 units of rent geared to income are committed because they are these are the single family homes around Barrie that are being sold off. They're inefficient, affordable housing that need to be replaced. As a system service manager, you do have the opportunity to replace the units anywhere in the county. However, because these were rent geared to income, which is the deepest subsidy of affordability that our system offers, are all in Barrie, there was a commitment to keep them in Barrie, and this is how we wanted to meet that commitment. Additionally, there's another 24 units that we're using provincial and federal funding that require the 80% of average market rent set by CMHC, which is still a very low rent. So those are the 2 that are locked in. So if you do the math, that puts us at something like 86 units in total that are kind of committed in terms of their revenue generating capability. The remainder, to your first comment, it's not the sole purpose of adding the units was not just to make it sustainable, because in option 1, we proved sustainability at 900,000 net profit after all investments in capital. It's really that's one consideration, is to create the market units to create more revenue. But more importantly, it's because we want that mixed income community that's diverse, inclusive, and has different members of the community living together. So.
Councillor Measures.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I want to thank, first of all the members of the House who have commented so far. I think this is a great conversation. Excuse me. I think the project that's been presented is a very workable project. I actually want to go back to General Manager Wilcox's comment where he said that the county can handle this project financially. We can do it within our abilities, and so I think that that's to be respected, that it is something within the ability of this county to do. And so, speaking to Councillor Fallis's recommendation to go back and send it back, it would be my thought that while the size of the project is perhaps appropriate for the site, as Councillor Hamilton said, I think that there will be other sites. As councillors, as elected officials, let's think 30 years down the road, there will be other builds like this. And this is a big county, and I would expect that there will be builds like this in other municipalities other than the city of Barrie. And actually, to Councillor Smith, my municipality has been saving money to build a seniors affordable housing project as well. So I appreciate your comments on that. So my thought is, I think we need to move ahead on option number 3, and I would ask this House to support that. The second part about that is that to borrow something from those that are environmentalists, ask yourselves, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. So when's the best time to build this type of housing? Thank you.
Excellent point. Moving on to Councillor Ritma.
Thank you, Chair Leduc. I'm concerned about this motion that's before us, just simply because it refers it back to staff. And as the previous speaker said, the best time to do this is now and not sometime in the future. So I'm going to ask that we proceed with option 3. And I'm quite sure that as the staff work out the details, that they will come back to us at some point and say, you know, we've looked at this and we can put another couple of units in here, we can tweak the costs, we can do a few things like that. And I would prefer that they go ahead with option number 3 and not refer back to staff for more paper. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that. I have the Warden.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I would like to see us proceed with option 3, but keeping in mind what Councillor Fallis is concerned with is the 80% of market. Maybe we can get that 24 units closer to the 90, still be profitable and have the building. I think that's what Councillor Fallis is looking for. So I would like to see us proceed with that option 3 and kind of breed that in with the motion that as we proceed, we try and increase those numbers of 80%.
Yeah, so
through the chair.
Go ahead.
I mean, I think that's certainly something that can be done. Post-approval, we would go back and take the feedback we received here and maybe do a follow-up report with additional options or combinations, including intensification, reduction in parking, if possible, and increased affordability. So we can come back to council and make a further detailed set of options past post-approval. But in order to get to tendering and stay on that timeline we shared, we'd have to move pretty quickly.
Yeah, okay, thank you. I'm going to give the last comment to this, and then we'll call the vote on this one. Councillor Fallis.
Thanks so much. Just a quick comment on this, because I know there's some hesitation around the delay, and just something I really wanted to point out. I really welcome staff's comment on this, but my understanding is, you know, this might mean at maximum, from the sounds of it, maybe like a month or 2. But we're talking about here, you know, major project with even net profit that the county's benefiting from. So, you know, the month is, like, in the grand scheme of things, is a really small speck in terms of the project, the size, and the potential benefit, not only to the families and the individuals that are benefiting from the project, but also for the county as well. So just the final comment there. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm just going to comment that I don't really see it as a big exercise either, because you got the numbers all in front of you. And if you look at the option 3, it has 66 at 100%. You move that over, you're taking the $1.4 million and you're moving it down to 906, somewhere in that range. So it's just a number game, right, to play with the 90 versus 24. So whether we want to go with staff or not, go ahead.
Just through the chair, point of clarification. In order to come back with a detailed report, we'd have to do new soil testing on intensification. That would take well more than a month. In fact, it would probably take us into the fall. And then another consideration, if we take that kind of delay in the process, what would happen is we have that temporary emergency shelter planned for one more winter, and it would then have to be relocated as a modular unit. So it does play into other operational impacts across the board. Again, we can come back and do that concurrently to beginning the planning and tendering of this project.
Okay, I missed that then. It's you want to go up. I missed that.
No, through the chair, just the sense I was getting from a lot of the conversation here was there was a lot of call for increasing density. I wanted to put that in the option as well. I think it's still worth considering, given the amount of calls for it, but I think if it's overturned, then I guess we'd go to an option 3 with increasing the affordability of it. Thanks.
Okay, so I will actually call the vote. We've had a great discussion on this, and there is a lot of options out there. So we'll call the vote on this as a new option, so amended option 1 and 3. So I will ask for the vote. All in favor of the new option put on the table? Okay, opposed? Okay, sorry, carried. All right, we'll go back to Councillor, I think it was measures that you, who put it on? Okay, Councillor Rittma, you put on a motion.
Thank you, Chair Leduc. My motion would be that we direct staff to proceed with option number 3.
Okay, we've got option number 3. I had Councillor Cox first, sorry, measures. She was all over me about getting second on this, so. Okay, I know everybody wants to second this one. There's no, so comments, further comments, and quickly, if we have anything to add new. Thank you, Councillor Fryer.
Just a comment that my understanding is staff will continue to work on intensification aspects that can work on the same pro forma that we're seeing, right? That's my understanding of it.
Yeah, this is a concept, I think, and I think there's lots of room for staff to work on some more opportunities, because they've heard a great discussion today. I mean, we had some great comments out there, and I think there is opportunities for staff to come back with some new data if they have it. So,
yeah, through the chair, yes, we can commit to coming back with a report on different options of intensification and combinations of affordability, and address some of the parking issues raised.
Excellent. So everybody's happy with that? Staff's heard the comments and everything? Great. So I will, Councillor Snell.
Sorry, just a point of clarification. So with this option that's before us now, this does not require you to go back and do soil testing and possibly compromise the timeline of the project or for the homeless shelter. Is that correct?
Through the chair, no, it would not require us. We'd proceed with the plan design and tendering. Concurrently, we could do that. What I was referring to is if we delayed to a referral back to council for a report outside of approval, we would have to stop, get that information, come back, and then go for the approval. But if you do approve this option, we can concurrently report back different intensification options, the pro formas of those costs to increase, but start the planning and design and tendering process in general.
Okay, so I actually have an option on the floor, if you don't mind. I think we've had great comments on it. So I have, if that council approve the following option to proceed with development as identified within item CCW 2023-61, option 3, 176 residential affordable housing and mixed income units split. Or that in addition to the previously approved allocation to the project of approximately $6 million from the 2024-25 Ontario Priorities Housing Initiative and the Canada-Ontario Housing Initiative, combined allocations, a further $1 million be allocated to the project from the Social Housing Reserve, as well as all proceeds from the sale of scattered units in Barrie, and that staff proceed with the detailed design, planning approvals, tendering, contract award, site preparation, and construction of the mixed-use affordable housing development project as generally outlined within item CCW 2023-61, and that the signing officers for the Simcoe County Housing Corporation execute all required applications, agreements, and documents. And I think it's on the floor right here. So. Everybody, final comment.
Thanks. Through the chair, apologies for the headache here, but I wanted to make sure in putting this option forward, are we including the element of affordability, like are staff considering the affordability element from option 1 in this option already?
You heard him. You heard him say it earlier. You heard him say it earlier. Staff will come back with some options for us. They'll review that. They've heard the comments out here, so we've got it on the floor. All right. I'll call for the vote. All in support of option 3. Carried. Thank you. Opposed? I'm going to pass back to the warden to call a break.
Yes, we'll take a break until 11:25. Fill up your coffee, get a cold drink, have a bio break. Okay, folks.
You're not paying any attention. Get that gavel.
There we go.
That's not even hitting.
Oh, I don't want to break the gavel. Come on in,
Council,
folks.
take your seat. Can we get everybody break it up? Take your seat. Call. All right, Council, we're on 7.1. CCW 2023-63, IRCC Agreement Amendment 2023-2025. Mover and a seconder for this, please. Moved by Councillor McDonald, seconded by Councillor McClellan. Question or concerns with this report? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Moving on. McClellan, right here. Stephanie? My mover was McDonald. Have I got my mic on? Moving her is McDonald, seconded by McClellan. Sorry. I'll try to slow down. But I need to be out of here in a few minutes. CCW 2023-89, Association of Municipalities of Ontario, call to end homelessness. Mover seconded for this, please. By Councillor McClellan, seconded by Councillor Van Staven. Question or concerns with this report? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried, thank you. We're into Section 8, Human Services Long-Term Care Committee of Management. So I have 8.1, CCW 2023-092, Simcoe Strong Volunteer Program. Mover second for this, please. Moved by Councillor Fowler, seconded by Councillor Anderson. Questions or concerns with this report? Lots of volunteers going on. It's great to see that. Lots of hours being put in at our long-term care homes, so I really appreciate that. Questions? All right. No questions? All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Moving on to 8.2, long-term care and senior services paramedic guidance change. Or pandemic guidance change. Sorry. So it's CCW 2023-107, long-term care senior services pandemic guidance changes. Moved by Councillor Sandu, seconded by Councillor Walker. Questions or concerns with this report? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried, thank you. We are on to 8.3, CCW 2023-117, Long-Term Care Service Accountability Agreement. Mover second for this, please. Moved by Councillor Smith, seconded by Councillor Miskinen. Questions or concerns with this report? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried, thank you. 8.4, we are into CCW 2023-118, Multi-Sectoral Service Accountability Agreement. Moved by Councillor Measures, seconded by Councillor Cabral. Questions or concerns with this report? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried, thank you. We are into Section 9, Human Services, Other Matters for Consideration. We have 9.1, Municipal Representatives of the Affordable Housing Advisory Committee report. Mover second, please. Moved by Councillor Coghlan, seconded by Councillor McClellan. Questions or concerns with this report? Seeing none, all in favor? Thank you. 9.2, Affordable Housing Advisory Committee report, April 21st, 2023. So I need a mover and a seconder for this. Moved by Councillor McClellan, seconded by Councillor Condon. Questions or concerns with the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried, thank you. Moving right along. Actually, you know what, Warden? I'll turn it back to you.
I had made up for lost time, so I'll turn it over now to Chairman Dolan.
Thank you. Why do I feel like I'm at an auction? But thanks, everyone. So we're on item 10, which is our corporate services consent. There's two items on the consent list. 10.1 is a solid waste management, solid waste data and audit summary. And 10.2, which is actually a presentation that's going to be done by Director Huther. So we'll have that presentation first, and then I'll ask for a mover and a seconder for the consent list. So whenever you're ready, Director.
Thank you. Through you, Chair Dolan. Working with consultant Stiletto and our labor market partners across the county over the last 6 months, the Economic Development Office has completed a labor market research study, and that's what we're here to present to you today. The study is a project included in the county's 5-year economic development strategy with an objective to improve linkages between educators, our labor market partners, industry, and as well as job seekers and students. This project was funded by the Rural Economic Development Program through OMAFRA. And as we go forward, the recommendations will be implemented by not just the County Simcoe, but our labor market partners across the county, including our post-secondary education institutions, other labor market partners, and industry. The County Economic Development Office has applied for funding to the Skills Development Fund to help support implementation of key recommendations within the strategy. And this project was presented to the Economic Development Committee at the March 14th subcommittee meeting. And at their request, we're here to present the outcomes of the study to you today. And with me is Hannah Conroy, our senior EDO, who's been one of the leads on this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy, and good morning, Your Worship and County Councillors. I'm pleased to be here this morning to present on the Labour Market Research Study. So as Nancy mentioned, the county and area partners, including our member municipalities, the cities of Barrie and Orillia, receive funding from the province to execute a workforce attraction and retention program. It included 4 key areas: employer education and collaboration, hiring events, which includes virtual job fairs. We hosted our most recent event on February 28th with over 700 job seekers and 90 employers. Awareness building initiatives, which includes promoting our work in Simcoe County job site, as well as a video that we created showcasing newcomer success stories and the amazing quality of life here in Simcoe County. And 4th, the labor market research study, which will be the focus of the presentation today. So as Nancy mentioned, the labor market research study was undertaken in alignment with our 5-year economic development strategy to support the goals shown on the screen, focused on attracting and retaining talent to support the needs of our thriving business community. This supports the objective focused on strengthening linkages between education, industry, and students. The study aims to identify any skills gaps and help stakeholders deliver programming that matches industry needs. The purpose of the study included identifying local training programs, opportunities, and proposed programs to address gaps, including actionable next steps and suggested leads. It focused on 4 key sectors outlined in our strategy: manufacturing, agriculture, tourism, professional, scientific, and technical services. In addition, 2 growth-related sectors of healthcare and construction identified through the Western Ontario Wardens Caucus strategy were also included in the study. So how was it developed? It was developed using both primary and secondary research methodologies, including a business survey with a really strong response rate of 392 responses, focus groups and interviews with 54 stakeholders, along with an analysis of key secondary data sources such as StatScan and the Work in Simcoe County job site. As a result of the research undertaken, the team identified the following key overall findings. The 6 priority sectors have demonstrated resilience during the COVID pandemic. Over half of the employers, 63%, plan to expand their businesses in the next 5 years. Several valuable opportunities exist to strengthen education workforce alignment. Soft skills are absolutely essential and are often lacking among candidates. Newcomers and immigrants are an underutilized employee base, and Simcoe County has a really strong work-life balance brand. The study includes numerous cross-sector and sector-specific recommendations. Drawing on stakeholder feedback and secondary research, opportunities across all 6 sectors were identified in 5 areas. 1, fostering inclusive leadership. So providing employers with additional knowledge and training about the value of a diverse workforce and the ways to attract and retain such talent. Building soft skills. So building on existing training programs to embed soft skill development in curriculum at all levels. Connecting the community and reducing barriers, providing additional support and programs to remove barriers often faced by newcomers, and creating a more welcoming community for both newcomers and international students. Collaborating and learning across sectors, providing opportunities for industry to come together to discuss successes and challenges, providing an opportunity to learn and innovate across the 6 sectors. And connecting the ecosystem, so ensuring that industry is connected to education, which includes facilitating conversations across the ecosystem to ensure that industry is aware of the resources available to them and that programming aligns with industry needs. There are also several sector-specific recommendations, which I will now highlight next. For the manufacturing, key recommendations included capacity building and mentorship programs to encourage professional development as well as leveraging existing leadership programs. Promoting career pathways in the trades. For example, delivering events that increase awareness of the demand for and the benefits of working in the trades, as well as addressing any misconceptions about what it means to be a skilled tradesperson. Increasing access to programs. This includes examples such as potentially expanding existing Excellence in Manufacturing Consortium programming to those that not already in the workforce, and working with the school boards to ensure machine shops are in high schools. Promoting existing resources to industry, such as upskilling programs and student placements, was another recommendation. Looking at the healthcare sector, recommendations include strengthening industry partnerships with post-secondary to ensure that there are enough placement opportunities, introducing bridging programs, credential recognition, and occupation-specific language training for newcomer populations, promoting careers in healthcare by working with school boards and guidance counselors to ensure students are aware of the diversity of the career pathways that exist in the healthcare sector, integrating soft skills into the existing curriculum. Some examples cited in the study include communication and professionalism, and providing more training for managing mental health to avoid burnout of the existing workforce in this sector. Looking at the tourism sector, recommendations include promoting existing training programs to workforce and industry, hosting employer events focused on strengthening employee retention and engagement, and working with education partners to embed sector-specific soft skills into the curriculum. For the professional, scientific, and technical services sector, similarly, it's recommended to work with education partners to embed sector-specific soft skills into curriculum, coordinate a cross-industry mentorship program to help address the missing middle management that was cited in the study, creating a targeted campaign to show local companies how programs and students align with their needs, such as open houses and tours of post-secondary. Also, given that Simcoe County has a competitive advantage to other jurisdictions in the ready and skilled workforce, there is an opportunity to target business development and retention in sectors where professional, scientific, and technical graduate services are needed. For agriculture and agri-food, recommendations include working with education and training institutions to proactively target organizations in the sector and connect them with work-integrated learning opportunities, such as applied research and capstone courses. Also, exploring augmenting programming options to strengthen and expand diploma, certificate, and micro-credential level education. For the construction sector, recommendations include establishing new sector-specific events and creating places to share data and trends, similar to the Manufacturing Innovation Summit, which provides opportunities for collision and information sharing. Promoting career pathways in the construction industry at an early age by working with school boards to ensure students are aware of the diversity of career options in construction. Developing and expanding access to professional networks among newcomer populations to alleviate barriers to entering the industry, and exploring funding opportunities related to early mentoring and career pathway development, particularly among young equity-denied individuals who may not usually have access to such supports. Looking at next steps for implementation, several of the priority actions from the study have been integrated into our EDO work plan for 2023, particularly under the Talent Attraction and Retention Goal 2. Some specific examples include partnering with the school board on the Skilled Trades Expo this fall, promoting work-integrated learning, sharing success stories that showcase diversity in our local companies, and hosting virtual job fair events. Additionally, we are actively seeking funding opportunities for implementation, including an application submitted to the Skills Development Fund, as Nancy mentioned, which focuses on soft skills training, mentorship, awareness building and marketing, and continuing to execute those Skilled Trades Expo events for the next 3 years. The steering committee will also continue to meet quarterly to help guide implementation of the recommendations. We have a multi-stakeholder working committee comprised of municipal, workforce, and training partners that's led by our office. And we'll also continue to present the findings to key partner organizations, including but not limited to post-secondary, school boards, sector associations, and regional partners to identify opportunities to collaborate on implementation. Thank you so much for your time and attention today. We are really looking forward to implementing the recommendations of this study in collaboration with all of our great partners across the region.
Thank you very much, Ms. Conroy and Director Huther. Any questions for either? Councillor Van Stavern.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick comment. Driving over here this morning from Clearview, I listened to KIX 106 out of Aurelia. 2 ads were on the paper, on the radio this morning. One was from Walker Industries, and they were not advertising a specific yard. Everybody knows Walker is in Clearview. They are in Oro-Medonte. They're up in Oro. They were down here as well. And they were just advertising Simcoe County. The second ad was, I believe, from Georgian College, but I'm not even sure. They were advertising electricians, plumbers, and carpenters and explaining they could get 3-month grants and everything. I was really impressed. So I don't know if you guys had anything to do with that in your part, like we were listening to your partnership relationships, because I don't know if these companies are doing this out of desperation or doing it because of a cooperative relationship, but it was a very effective advertising at 8 o'clock in the morning. So can you just speak to that a bit if you're working with these people and just explain what your input is there? Thank you.
Sure. Through you, Chair Dolan, and thank you for your question, Councillor. I'm not aware of that specific ad, but we certainly do work closely with our industry partners. And one of the things that the county does is the Work in Simcoe County job site. So essentially the way that that works is it aggregates job listings from over 30 popular job boards. So your Indeed, your Workopolis, your Job Bank. So any local Simcoe County company that advertises on one of those job boards, it automatically showcases on Work in Simcoe. And that's a tool that we are actively promoting both inside the region and outside the region to help assist companies with their attraction efforts. But we also do a lot of other initiatives like trying to bring companies together to share best practices through different events and things like that. But that's great to hear that ad also showcase that partnership.
And the nice part about the Walker ad is they were promoting Simcoe. They were not talking about our community or Oro or any of those. It was all about Simcoe. So I think the idea of partnerships within, not to be too specific, but sometimes we have to get specific, and it was a really effective ad. Let's put it that way. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I can just add anecdotally that I did hear from an employer who participated in the job fair, and he got 6 potential good candidates from that job fair. So I'm passing on his thanks to you. Seeing none, is there anyone who had a question about the solid waste data report? Go ahead, Councillor.
It's not a question, Madam Chair, but just an ask. We have a workshop coming up, and I would hope that I would ask staff if they could look at the yard waste program that we have out there and see if there's a way that we can split that up. We have nine. So I'm just asking if staff come back in that workshop, looking at costs to move that through the summer months also. So if that could be part of the workshop.
Thank you. I can see Jim Elliott writing something down there, so I think he's heard your request. So could I please have a mover and a seconder then that the following consent items, having been given due consideration, be received? Councillor Measures and Councillor Cabral, all those in favor? Those contrary? That is carried. Next is item 11. Sorry. Yes, item 11, other matters for consideration. 11.1 is the Economic Development Subcommittee report from March the 14th. Any questions or comments on that? Then could I have a mover and a seconder, please, that the recommendations contained within the Economic Development Subcommittee report dated March 14th, 2023 be approved. Moved by Councillor Fryer, seconded by Councillor Fowler. All those in favor? That is carried. And finally, 11.2, that would be a report from the Grant Program Task Force. Questions or comments? Councillor Cox.
I just have a comment, and what I want to comment on is that this is one of the best grant programs we have, and I know that when I read it, almost every single municipality has applied, or a group from the municipality, and I want to say that if it wasn't for this grant program, there are a lot of events and a lot of things that would not happen in our municipality. So just a kudos to the county for having this program and allowing all the different organizations to apply so that they can plan events or fix their trails or do media advertising, which they could never afford, all sorts of things. So I just want to say thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cox. Any other questions or comments on the program? Seeing none, then moved by Councillor Cox and seconded by Councillor Anderson that the recommendation contained within the Grant Task Force report dated April the 5th, 2023 be approved. All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried, and I'll pass it. There's no other. I pass it over to you, Warden. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Dolan. And now if Councillor Cox would chair performance management, please.
Okay, first of all, we have our consent, and the recommendation is that the following consent item, having been given due consideration, be received. I need a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Councillor Bell and seconded by Councillor Fryer. Anyone have any questions on this? Comments? Okay, all in favor? Carried. Next is 13.1, recommendation that item CCW 2023-109 dated April 11th, 2023 regarding Simcoe County Museum electrical service and HVAC retrofit projects updates be received, and that subject to deliberation in the affirmative that the funds be allocated from the prior budget carryover, general contingency reserve, and or 2023 surplus to fund the Simcoe County Museum electrical service and HVAC retrofit project as outlined in item CCW 2023-109. Mover and a seconder. Moved by Councillor McDonald, second by Councillor Fowler. Questions? Comments? Seeing none, all in favor? Carried. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Everybody's seen the in-camera report. Is there a need to go in camera to discuss some more?
I knew it was.
I'm not seeing any, so that way we'll just go right into the motions then. So 14.1, the direction in camera contained within confidential item CCW 2023-096 dated April 11, 2023 regarding OPSU 303 bargaining labor relations or employee negotiations be voted upon and approved in accordance with section 239 6B of the Municipal Act. Moved by Councillor Rawson, second by Councillor Greenlaw. All in favor? That is carried. And lastly, the direction in camera and the recommendations contained within item CCW 2023-104 regarding the proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or local board be approved. Moved by Councillor Snell, second by Councillor Fowler. All in favor? That is carried as well. Thank you. And I'll look for a motion to adjourn the April 11, 2023 meeting of Committee of the Whole at 11:40. We'll wait 2 seconds here. 11:49. Moved by Councillor McDonald, second by Councillor Evans. All in favor? That is carried. Is there lunch tickets for the folks, John?